You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Naruto Meets Sekirei. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of ZuttoAragi on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. In a park on the northern side of the Leaf Village, a battle was brewing. On one side stood Kakashi with his Sekirei, Hikari and Hibiki. They were protecting Naruto, Musabi, and Akitsu. On the other side stood Mikagami, Ashikabi of the south with two of his Sekirei, Mutsu and Yomi. Listen, if it's all the same to you, I don't personally enjoy battles between Sekirei. So, if you hand over the scrapped number nice and easy, this can go without a hitch. Well? Mikagami asked, a smug tone reverberating in his voice. Mutsu placed one hand on his blade, narrowed his eyes and spoke, Jounin or not, Kakashi Hadake, you are no match for both of us. Kakashi took a lazy look back at Naruto, who sneered and shook his head slightly, taking protective hold of Akitsu, much to the latter's apparent pleasure. Seeing this, Kakashi shrugged. He looked at his Sekirei then to Mikagami and answered succinctly, no. With a sigh and slight shrug, Mikagami waved a hand and said, very well, get them. Mutsu practically vanished into thin air. He became a black and orange blur, his sword being stopped by Hikari's lightning-encased forearm. Sorry, bud, but our Ashikabi thinks the scrapper's worth protecting. So, irritating as it is to protect another Sekirei, you're going down. Mutsu huffed. You really think you can beat a single digit? HMPH, you're full of it. Mutsu pressed his sword against Hikari's arm and propelled off, then tapped his sword on the ground, followed by a slicing motion towards Hikari. Realizing what that meant, Hikari jumped as high as she could. Stone spears, Mutsu said calmly as hundreds of near senbon-sized needles of rock shot towards the more temperamental lightning twin. Hikari clicked her tongue in irritation, and then remembered something Kakashi told her and smirked. She again encased her arm in crackling, purple electricity, but then concentrated the electricity into her hand, pointed it at the needles and called out, lightning senbon, as thousands of small needles made of electricity shot from her hand, completely overpowering Mutsu's attack. Mutsu hopped back several times to dodge the senbon, and then dodge in all directions as the never-ending barrage pelted him. Irritated at missing, Hikari grumbled, stand still will ya? The shower stopped when her charged electricity ran out. Crap. Seeing his chance, Mutsu leapt into the air to meet Hikari, and with a swiftness gained only through experience, kicked her square in the stomach as plummeted to the ground below, releasing a blast of electricity from her feet just in time to not get deactivated. You seem rather versatile with your element, Mutsu noted calmly, biting his lip lightly in irritation. Yeah, lightning's the most versatile right behind wind. But it's way cooler, she yelled proudly. She fired a burst at Mutsu, who dodged towards the hill next to him and slid down. Hey, get back here, asshole. She stopped when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked back to see Kakashi shaking his head. Why? She demanded. He just pointed. Her eyes widened when she saw the ground around Mutsu deforming lightly every so often, with his sword stabbed into the earth. Damn, his manipulation's that good, huh? He is a single number after all, Kakashi said lazily. Hikari pouted in response, stop telling me. Hibiki, on the other hand, wasn't faring nearly as good. Yomi's scythe allowed her limited wind manipulation, meaning just about every attack, save for some more powerful electric blasts, were snuffed out before they got close to the sadistic scythe wielder. And close quarters combat was out of the question. With her large scythe, Yomi could chop Hibiki into small pieces before she even got close. After narrowly dodging another wind blade, Hibiki cursed as it nicked her shoulder. Damn, I can't even get close like this. She jumped to the side, back, then up in the air to dodge more attacks. However, upon seeing Yomi's wide smirk, Hibiki realized just how costly that move was. She was up in the air almost completely defenseless, and the short augmentations she could make in the air with bursts of electricity wouldn't be nearly powerful enough and quick enough to dodge Yomi's next attack. Realizing this, she did the only thing she could think of. She charged as much electricity into her right hand as possible as Yomi slashed the air multiple times, sending nearly 9 blades of wind at her. Seeing her last chance, Hibiki released all the charged energy in one powerful wide burst that had 2 effects. First, the blast had enough pent-up energy to overpower most of Yomi's attacks. Second, the recoil sent Hibiki rocketing to the ground. She released a quick burst of electricity from her back to prevent from getting splattered, but still hit hard enough to knock the wind out of her chest, leaving her coughing for several seconds. After the days of being hit with the electrically charged air wore off, Yomi saw Hibiki on the ground desperately clamoring for air and got a devilish smirk, rushing over to her position with her scythe held high. She swung it down, hoping to decapitate the dark-haired Sekirei, but was astonished when a small wall of pure electricity stopped her scythe. Seeing Yomi's surprised look, Hibiki chuckled. "It's something I just came up with, and I call it the polarity wall." Hibiki stood up shakily, keeping her wall locked with Yomi's blade, and charged electricity into her clenched fist. With perfect timing, she dropped the wall, causing Yomi to stumble and falter, and jabbed at her midsection with her charged fist, resulting in not only the damage from her punch, which was still significant despite her weakened state, but also from a surge of electricity coursing through Yomi's body. Once she went limp, Hibiki tossed her to the ground like a throw pillow and prepared to remove her crest, and thus take her out of the game, when several baseball-sized chunks of rock flew by her. Standing across from her was Mutsu, who had run up the hill and tried to slash at Hikari. Hikari was deftly grabbed across the waist and pulled to safety by Kakashi. That's when Naruto noticed something. "Kakashi-sensei, why aren't you fighting?" he asked, irritated and confused. Seeing genuine confusion, Kakashi answered, "Ashikabi aren't supposed to participate." "So?" Naruto asked in disbelief. "You just gonna let them fight like that?" "I know they can take care of themselves," Kakashi said with an eye smile. "Really, if you hadn't saved, whichever one that is, she would have severely injured or killed by whoever that guy is," Naruto said, realizing he didn't know any of their names. Seeing his point and realizing how powerful a single number was, Kakashi shrugged. "Well, can't be helped I guess," he said as he got into a battle stance. Hikari looked at him shocked. "You don't seriously think it'll take all 3 of us to beat him, do you?" Kakashi I smiled again and responded, "You never can be too careful. Besides, I still owe this guy for slicing up my book," he finished with anime tears. The twins just looked at him in disbelief and disgust, Hikari saying, "I can't believe our Ashikabi is such a pervert." Kakashi I smiled again before the 3 charged at Mutsu. Mutsu steeled himself for retaliation. First was Hibiki with a well-charged fist. Being careful to stay away from her hand, Mutsu slapped it away and tried knee her in the gut, but she blocked with her other hand and jumped away. Next was Hikari trying an electrified kick, the electricity going all the way up to her knee. Mutsu jumped to the side and took the long recovery time to nail Hibiki in the solar plexus with the butt of his sword, knocking her off balance and taking her breath. Kakashi came in last, with a well-timed jab to the face which Mutsu barely dodged. Mutsu retaliated with his free hand and tried to punch Kakashi's face, but used his extended arm to knock it away. Kakashi aimed a low, high, mid-punch-kick combination that caught Mutsu off guard at the end, resulting in a painful knee to the stomach. Using the momentum from the kick, Kakashi spun counterclockwise and tried hit Mutsu on the side of the head with his shin. Mutsu brought up arm and blocked it with his forearm, wincing as his lack of stable footing caused him to go tumbling anyway. Rolling twice before kicking off the ground, he landed and slid, sheathing his sword and tapped the ground below him. "Smashing point," he said calmly as the ground in front of him split into cubic chunks and crumbled, knocking Kakashi off his footing, giving Mutsu time to leap at him, attempt to hit him with his still-sheathed sword. Kakashi put his arms in a defensive X pattern and took the blow, which was good as it prevented him from getting a broken nose, but bad as the sheer force of Mutsu's strike sent him hurtling back into tree with a loud thud, knocking several leaves down and winding the silver-haired jounin. Naruto was in awe at the battle before him. This single number, Mutsu, just took on a jounin and two at least chunin-powered fighters at the same time, and all he got was a scrape to the forearm and a nasty blow to the gut. He was in so much awe that he barely noticed said single digit walking calmly over to him. Once he did, however, it took everything he had not just get up and run. He was strong and confident, yes, but not stupid. If this guy was able to so effortlessly take on a jounin and two at least chunin with little effort, he didn't stand a chance. His eyes widened to incredible proportions, however, when Musabai stood in front of him in a defensive posture. "You will not hurt Naruto," she said, glaring defiantly at the single number. Mutsu didn't flinch at her weak, killing intent as he released a bit of his own and said calmly, "I'm not here for him or you for that matter. I'm here for her. Give me that and you can go," pointing to Akitsu. Seeing this, Naruto stood up and glared at him. He may have known couldn't beat this guy, even with Musabai's help, but he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he just handed that defenseless woman over, and so he got into the stance for the first taijutsu style that came to mind. Kakashi's eyes, or eye rather, widened when he saw the stance Naruto took. It wasn't the normal academy stance, or even one of the simpler ones available to lower-ranking shinobi. It was the intercepting fist, the style favored by the Uchiha clan. He racked his brain to try and decipher how Naruto knew it, but was brought from his musings by a small cough. He looked to his left and saw Yomi regaining consciousness. Mutsu narrowed his eyes as he prepared to launch one of his attacks, but was taken by surprise when Naruto swooped in low and aimed a high knee strike that Mutsu was able to easily dodge despite his surprise. Naruto tried several more attacks, a punch to the face that was knocked away, a sweep kick that was jumped over, and a high, low, high feint low combo with all different parts that were either dodged, blocked, and redirected. Irritated, Naruto jumped back and launched several shuriken followed by several hand signs. Shadow Shuriken Jutsu, 8 shuriken became 24 with multiple puffs of smoke. Despite being surprised at first, Mutsu effortlessly dodged and knocked away every single one with his sword. It was then he felt something different. The air on the battlefield shifted, a faint light was visible through the smoke. With the loud sound, something whirling and spinning violently filled the air. Confused, Kakashi nearly swallowed his tongue when he realized what the sound was. Mutsu barely had any time to react as Naruto, accompanied by a shadow clone, jumped from the smoke with a softball-sized mass of erratically spinning and churning bright blue chakra headed straight for him. "Rasengan," Naruto yelled. It was still incomplete as he couldn't form it or even use it without a shadow clone. But there it was, the fourth Hokage's second most famous jutsu being held in the 15-year-old blonde's hands. Mutsu brought his sheathed blade up to block the attack, narrowing his eyes as he slid back slightly. His eyes then shot open when the Rasengan lost its shape and exploded violently, shooting Mutsu back at high speeds, dispelling Naruto's clone and shooting him back as well. Mutsu flew back and hit Mikagami as the two crumpled to ground ungracefully. Mutsu in a slight daze and Mikagami out cold. Naruto, on the other hand, was gracefully caught Musabai, his mind going from confusion to sheer bliss as he registered what his head landed on. Musabai, however, was none the wiser. Seeing the current condition of all combatants, Kakashi looked at dazed Mikagami and said, "I'd say this battle is over. As a result, it's outside of MBI jurisdiction." Glaring and slightly perplexed at the man's words, Mikagami just stood there defiantly. Seeing his expression, Kakashi sighed and explained, "Meaning any further aggression will be counted as an assault on a leaf shinobi. Understood?" Disgruntled that his prize got away but not wanting to deal with authorities, Mikagami made several quick gestures as Mutsu hoisted him on his shoulder and took off, a frantically yelling Yomi following behind. Kakashi sighed once again and said, looking at Naruto, "Well?" Confused, he responded, "Well, what?" "Well, what did you think of your first Sekirei battle?" Kakashi asked, awaiting his answer. After thinking for a couple seconds, Naruto looked him in the eye and said seriously, "I think it's insane." Kakashi smiled, satisfied. He then pointed to the still bloodied and confused Akitsu and asked, "What are you going to do with her?" Adopting a think pose, Naruto thought briefly, then scratched at his head in annoyance. "Not sure. First I need to know exactly what a scrapped number is." "Well," Kakashi started, with a similar posture. Basically, there's a specific amount of chakra a person needs to have in their bodies, meaning they either need to be gifted civilians or average shinobi to wing a Sekirei. If they don't have the right amount of chakra and kiss the Sekirei, nothing is supposed to happen. Noticing Kakashi's emphasis on the word supposed, he said, meaning that's not always the case. Kakashi nodded. Sometimes, if the chakra reserves of the person almost high enough, but not quite, the Sekirei's body will still try to initiate the winging by absorbing chakra from that person. Since it won't be enough, the basic bond that connects that Sekirei's chakra system to that person is created, but the emotional bond or the ability to use their most powerful attack called a Naruto is out of their reach. When this happens, at least if what these two have told me is correct, he said, motioning to Hikari and Hibiki, who glared at his veiled insult. Then MBI places a special seal that prevents anyone else from bonding with that Sekirei, because even a winged Sekirei can be bonded to someone else if a titanic enough amount of chakra is used. Naruto thought for a moment, glanced at Akitsu, then Kakashi, then Akitsu and back several times before a proverbial light bulb went off. Seeing the realization hit him, Kakashi smiled and asked, "Figured it out yet?" Naruto nodded noncommittally and then spoke. "So basically, if I feed her enough of my chakra, then I can not only break that seal but bond her to me. Is that right?" Kakashi shrugged. "Don't know. I don't know of many other scrapped numbers, and definitely don't know anyone else besides high jounin like myself or the cage that have high enough reserves to even attempt it. But it's worth a shot at least." Naruto nodded, then knelt down to Akitsu's level and brushed some of her hair aside, realizing its reddish-orange color was not natural but due to the blood staining it. Seeing this, he grimaced, then asked her, "Akitsu?" He waited for her to look at him and said, "Do you want to be my Sekirei?" She looked down and said solemnly, "I can't, I'm broken." Naruto gave her a reassuring smile and said, "I think I know a way to fix you though." Her head snapped up at him and she asked, "Will you stay beside me? Will you not throw me away?" He shook his head and said with slightest hint of rage, "You're a person, not a thing. Anyone who can even think of doing that deserves a swift kick in the face." Akitsu chuckled weakly at his not-so-eloquent response. Naruto gave her a wide, fox-like grin and said merrily, "Well, looky there, I made you laugh. So, I'll ask again, do you want to be my Sekirei?" Thinking for a moment and looking at him worriedly, she nodded. He nodded back and cupped her chin, then leaned in and planted a kiss on her lips. He tasted her lips on his, cold and frightened, with a flavor similar to shaved ice. Instantly he felt a reverse surge of chakra as her body absorbed it, but noticed that the flow stopped, realizing the mark was doing it. So, he increased how much chakra he was releasing, causing the mark to glow faintly as bits of chakra passed through it. Crinkling his brow in concentration, he mentally nodded and released as massive a surge as he could, resulting in the two became encased in a dome of loosely swirling chakra. The glow on the mark got brighter and brighter until it shattered. Almost immediately a set of multiple large wings made of ice appeared on Akitsu's back, glowing brightly before receding. Once they separated, Akitsu looked at Naruto with a light blush, which was still extremely noticeable on her pale skin, and he gave her a big, toothy grin. Sighing in satisfaction, Kakashi looked at the group and then spoke to Naruto. "Hey Naruto, why don't you guys get moving to Izumo Inn and rest up? Go ahead and bring them to the training ground tomorrow if you want." Naruto quirked an eyebrow and asked, though a team was only 3 members? "Well, Sekirei count more as summons in this case." He jumped slightly as Hikari zapped him with a light shock. "I'm referring solely to team building, since you guys aren't officially trained shinobi." Narrowing her eyes and crinkling her eyebrows in frustration, Hikari ultimately sighed with a shrug and said, "Fine, but that doesn't mean I'm not insulted." Just before they left, Musubai let out a yelp. "Now I know where I've seen you too." The twins plus Kakashi raised an eyebrow, until the twins lurched back slightly, dearly hoping the overexcited Sekirei wouldn't say any more. Too bad for them. "You're the two that chased me before I met Naruto," she said, pointing at them. The two looked at Kakashi with mild fear, who glared lightly at them with long huff. He then sighed and massaged his temple, saying, "How many times do I have to tell you two not to hunt unwinged Sekirei?" The two laughed sheepishly before Hibiki spoke first. We just thought it would make it easier for us to win the game, that's all. Honest, she finished with a placating gesture. This is gonna be a long night, Kakashi thought with exasperation. He looked at the two sternly, then back to Naruto. Why don't you guys go on? You'll want to be well rested tomorrow, he ended with an eye smile. Naruto nodded, picked up a kitsu bridal style, and started jumping on the rooftops with Musabai. Massaging his temples, Kakashi looked at the lightning twins sternly and said, We'll discuss this later. I've got reports to file, so go home first, and be ready. Without another word, he took off. Hey Hibiki, Hikari said flatly. Yeah, Hikari? We're in trouble, aren't we? Uh-huh. The two sighed in tandem and walked home in a defeated posture. Naruto, with the bloodied Akitsu unconscious on his back, walked up to the place on the directions. It was an old-fashioned house modeled after the homes used during the warring clans era. Noticing its size and elegance, Naruto couldn't suppress a whistle. Next, he placed Akitsu down and told Musabai, Watch over her while I investigate. He got a simple right in response followed by a silly salute. He nodded with a smile and walked up to the front door. Taking a breath to calm himself, Naruto knocked lightly on the door several times. Coming, a soft voice called from inside. Admiring the voice as he heard the shuffling of clothing, Naruto found a sudden boulder in his throat, and that temperature seemed to skyrocket as he looked at the owner of the house. Standing before him was a woman in her late 20s with waist-length, straight purple hair, dark purple-colored eyes, and fair skin. She had a traditional priestess outfit, with a white top and purple leggings only a few shades darker than her hair. While her appearance was nothing extreme like Musabai, Naruto couldn't help the slight blush on his face as he thought, so pretty. The woman looked at him with a slight blush and said happily, Why thank you. Naruto's breath hitched again. Apparently he hadn't just thought that, You know, it's impolite to stare, she said kindly. Naruto shook his head vigorously to get rid of the thoughts that were certain to form and trying to switch his brain back on, with mild success. He coughed into his fist and said, sheepishly, Hi. I was just wondering, do you have any vacancies? Giggling at his flustered state, the woman said, Yes, we actually have several. Do you mind telling why you came all the way out here? Confused by her question, he cocked an eyebrow and pointed to himself asking, Don't you know who I am? She looked him up and down with her hand on her chin with a curious expression. She then squinted her eyes in a smile and said, No, should I? Hope started to fill his features, followed by pain as he said, I'm Naruto Uzumaki. I'm here because I was kicked out of my last apartment, and absolutely no one else is willing to take me in, he finished with a sigh. Looking at him curiously, she said, I wonder why. You seem nice enough. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself and said, I'm the one they call the demon brat. Do that explain it, lady? She examined him again for a moment, then asked, Are you a demon? He just shook his head dumbly. Then I see no reason to turn you away, she said sweetly. A large, genuine smile filled her face and threatened to split it down the middle. My husband always said to help someone in need. Am I to assume you have companions with you? She asked. He nodded excitedly and called for Musabai, who was carrying Akitsu. Spotting the two, the landlady's eyes widened momentarily before returning to her passive gaze, followed by a worried expression. Oh my, what happened to her? She was attacked by someone, Naruto said, debating how much to tell her. I can't take her to a hospital either since they likely wouldn't help since she's affiliated with me. Well, I'm not an expert at medical jutsu, but my late husband taught me a few things, so I'll do what I can. However, she does need a fresh change of clothes, she said, ushering them inside. Naruto froze instantly. He had failed to realize in all the commotion that Akitsu was practically naked. He then slapped his face for being so stupid. In any case, storm clouds are gathering, so why don't you all get inside and we'll discuss what to do with her then, along with payment. Naruto nodded at her words and ushered Musabai inside. Up on the rooftops, several Anbu, whose masks were different from either normal Anbu or root members, as they were simple white masks with 2 eye holes and the Sekirei crest on it, stood watching the exchange. They looked at each other and nodded, with one disappearing in a puff of smoke. Then it started raining heavily, and the remaining member dropped his head, He slumped his shoulders in defeat. Naruto sat in the dining room of Izumo Inn admiring the architecture nervously when the landlady walked in through one of the sliding doors. Seeing her walk in, he said, "Thanks for helping us." Waving off his thanks, she replied, "Don't mention it." She gracefully walked over to the head of the table and sat, never losing the gentle smile on her face. "Like I said, my late husband Takedo never turned away someone in trouble." After a short pause, she asked, "So, if you don't mind me asking, what is your connection to them exactly?" Naruto flinched at this and gained a cold sweat, trying to come up with a plausible excuse, sputtering the entire time. Noticing his flustered attitude, she said reassuringly, "Don't bother with a lie. I know about the Sekirei plan." This caused Naruto to perk up, then to immediately shrink in on himself. "Hey, I didn't even say anything. How did you know?" She just nodded and handed him a cup of tea, which he took with a light bow. "I assumed they were Sekirei upon seeing them." Then she brought one sleeve up to her face and giggled lightly. "But seeing your flustered countenance just confirmed it." Naruto sent her an exasperated glare combined with a twitching eyebrow. His features softened and then dropped when he decided to ask her a question that had been bugging him. "You really don't mind having me stay here?" She shook her head slowly and attempted to soothe his concerns. "I'm not foolish enough to think that a Jinchuriki is the same as what they hold." Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. Then he gave his trademark toothy grin and said, "Thanks, landlady." Giggling, she said, "Just Mia is fine, all right?" With a thumbs up, he responded, "Got it." "What's all this noise?" a lazy and rather drunk-sounding voice asked from beyond one of the sliding screen doors. Naruto nearly jumped out of his skin when a woman with long black hair, 2 bangs of which framed her drunken-looking face, black-colored eyes, and a rather pronounced chest wandered in wearing little more than a thin nightgown with a mostly empty sake bottle. Seeing the woman, Mia's expression hardened in annoyance. Then she saw the sake bottle and asked, "Kazehana, is that one of my special sake flavors?" more as a veiled threat than a question. Too drunk to notice the threat behind her words, Kazehana lifted the bottle in confusion by the lack of a label, and then turned it to see the label on the other side. She looked at it for a second, her expression showing an intense level of concentration, or as intense as possible when one is heavily inebriated, when a light bulb seemed to have clicked on. Smiling sheepishly and rubbing the back of her head, Kazehana said weakly, "Yeah, I guess so." It was then that Mia appeared in front of her out of nowhere, took out a ladle she had stashed in a sleeve, how Naruto didn't want to know, and smacked Kazehana firmly across the head, sending the drunken woman tumbling to the floor unconscious. Looking back with a tired sigh, she said to Naruto, "I need to take care of this loafer. Musabai and Akitsu are in the second room on the second floor. You can go check on them if you want," more as a command than a suggestion. Naruto nodded dumbly as the woman grabbed Kazehana by the ankle and dragged her unceremoniously out the door. He just sat there with a sweat drop and a weak grin, clearing his throat to try and dispel the odd atmosphere that was brought on. He walked over to the stairs and went to the room Mia told him. Knocking on the door a couple of times, he waited for Musabai to open the door when she saw him and leapt at him like a cat, knocking the two of them gracelessly to the floor. "Naruto," she yipped excitedly, ensuring in said teen's mind that Musabai was in fact part dog. He was almost sure he saw her ponytail wagging. He chuckled uncomfortably and said to her, "As much as I appreciate my current situation," noting how Musabai's chest was pressed against him and how she straddled his leg. Seemingly more by accident than on purpose, if the awkward posture didn't show it, he continued, "Would you please get off? I want to check on Akitsu." Puffing out her cheeks in displeasure, the excitable Sekirei sat up and huffed. Seeing her adorable expression, the blonde's first thought was, is it even legal for a face that innocent to be on a body not so innocent? Noticing her Ashikabi's questioning gaze, Musabai looked at him puzzled and asked, "Is everything okay, Naruto?" Waving his arms wildly in front of him defensively, he said excitedly, No, nothing. I'm fine. Why do you ask?" "Heh heh." He chuckled weakly and noticed her accusing stare and swallowed nervously. "Okay," she chirped happily and stood up. "She is seriously going to give a heart attack. 9 tails or not," Naruto commented. "I'll laugh my ass off if that happens," he deadpanned. "Go to hell," he thought flatly with an outward grimace. He grimaced further when he heard snickering from the giant fox. "You okay?" Musabai asked with concern. Recognizing it for one the expressions he gets when his face emotes what he's thinking during his conversations Kirama, he said, "Yeah, I'm fine. I need to go check on Akitsu now." Pouting, Musabai responded, "Okay?" In the room, Naruto couldn't suppress the content smile at Akitsu, who was, now that she had been cleaned of all the blood and grime, showing off her light brown hair instead of the tinted orange it originally had been, sleeping peacefully. "Naruto?" Musabai asked, causing the blonde to jump slightly. "Why, yeah, Musabai," he said nervously, forgetting she was there. "Are we going to stay here?" she asked, a finger to her lips with worry. Naruto lightly glared with a twitching eyebrow, but suppressed his groan and said, "Yeah, I just need to work out the details with Mia." "Yay!" she shouted happily, throwing herself on the blonde, resulting in the two of them tumbling to the floor again. Naruto heard a moan beside him and looked, seeing Akitsu had woken up with a slight pouty expression. He chuckled weakly and waved, "Mornin', Akitsu." She sent him a light glare and said, "Not fair." He blinked several times and asked, "What isn't?" She pointed to his current cuddled state. He chuckled mirthlessly and said, "Oh, this." She puffed out her cheeks only the tiniest amount and said, "I want to cuddle with Master too." He blinked several times again and asked, "Master?" pointing to himself. With a barely noticeable smile, she nodded. Naruto pushed the happily giggling Musabai off and sighed. Then he looked at Akitsu and said seriously, "I don't want you calling me master, okay?" His words and tone made her shrink back a little, and she asked with tears edging her soft eyes, "Does master not want me?" Naruto cringed, realizing that she was about to cry, and it was his fault. He waved a hand in front of him and said with a mild blush, "No, that's not it at all." His reassurance cleared her tears and brought a small smile. Seeing her heightened state, he continued, "It's just weird being called master. So just call me Naruto, okay?" She nodded slowly but noticeably happy. Scratching his head with a sigh, he said, "Well, you two stay up here for a while. I need to go speak with Mia." "Herc." He curled back, seeing that both his Sekirei had very disappointed looks. He sighed in exasperation and said, "You can come." "Yay!" Musabai jumped excitedly. Akitsu just stood up and nodded with a lack of emotion. Naruto looked at them and then screamed when he noticed what Akitsu was wearing, or wasn't technically. All she still had on was her lab coat. Naruto quickly rushed out the door, leaving his Sekirei inside, and called Mia. The landlady slowly and gracefully made her way up the stairs with a concerned expression. "Is everything all right, Naruto?" He nodded tiredly and said, "Yeah, except one thing." Mia quirked an eyebrow and motioned him to continue. Naruto laughed uncomfortably and asked, Can Akitsu borrow some of your clothes?" Mia squinted her eyes and smiled sweetly, though Naruto noticed instantly this smile, despite appearing sweet, was in fact very dangerous. "You weren't doing anything lewd, were you?" she asked, hiding her mouth behind her sleeve. Naruto paled and waved his arms wildly. No, I wouldn't dream of it." Her smile seemed to return to a not-so-dangerously sweet level, and she said simply, "Of course, Akitsu can borrow whatever she needs until you buy some more." Hearing what she said, Naruto cringed, then replied, I can't buy her more." Mia looked at puzzled and asked, "Why not?" He laughed mirthlessly and said, "No one will sell anything to me because of the 9 tails." Her face became thoughtful for a moment, then she said, "Are you sure?" He gave a sad smile and answered, "Yeah, they'll either kick me out, refuse to sell me anything, or sell it at extreme markups. It hasn't been an issue until now. But now I've got 3 people to take care of and no way to get anything." Bringing her hand to her chin, she said with a smile, "I make weekly shopping trips. If you make a list, I'll get you what you need." He gave a big smile and asked, "Seriously?" She nodded in return. "Thank you. I'll figure out how to repay you for sure." "Ya no," he said, pumping his fist. Mia blinked for a moment and said, "Ya no?" Naruto looked at embarrassed and said, "Sorry, it's something I've done since I was little whenever I get excited." Mies just giggled behind her sleeve. "I think it's adorable." "That's the problem," he responded flatly. "I'm a guy. I'm supposed to be cool or handsome, Not adorable or cute. It seriously cuts into my manhood, he finished with a sigh. Her sickeningly sweet smile returning, Mia said, I would appreciate it if you kept mentions of your manhood outside of Izumo Inn. After all, my two main rules are no violence and no lewd acts. What I didn't even, never mind then, Naruto said hurriedly as he inched towards the stairs. He then stopped and asked, actually, that reminds me. How much is the rent here? Inside the seal, Kurama face palmed. Isn't that the first thing you should ask, brat? Mia looked at him and said, 40,000 a month. Naruto looked at her in utter shock. Why, you're kidding. Shaking her head slowly, she said, no. As long as you can follow my simple rules and do not cause trouble, 40,000 a month is all it takes. Naruto clenched his fists in excitement and said, you have no idea how much I want to hug you right now. Mia gave her all too sweet smile coupled with a laugh and an oppressive aura and asked, my, you wouldn't be trying to come on to an old widow, would you? Why do you expect the worst things from me? Naruto's replied, trying to ignore her aura as he slumped his head and shoulders and said, I don't have time for this. I'm gonna go to my room and unpack my things. Mia looked at curiously and pondered. How? You don't have any suitcases? Naruto immediately stood up straight with a big grin and said, watch. He pulled out a scroll from his pocket that said transportation on it, unrolled it and channeled chakra into one of the seals. One puff of smoke later, and another scroll appeared with furniture written on it. He opened it and channeled chakra into it, and out popped an alarm clock. Mia looked at him in astonishment. I had no idea you were so good with seals, she said with a squinted smile. He gave her a foxy grin and said, it's just one of the things I learned over the years. Gotta learn how to pick up and go in a rush. She eyed him with curiosity again and asked, you've only been a ninja for a day or two. Why would you need to be so concerned with that? His mirthless smile made another appearance when he said, the villagers always try and beat the crap out of me when they get the chance. So eventually I learned how to use storage seals to pack up whatever I had and get moving quickly to avoid a beating. Mia looked at him with a sad expression, not feeling the need to say a word. Naruto shrugged and said, well, that's all in the past now. He pointed to his headband and said, I'm full-fledged ninja now, so they'll get in trouble if they attack me. Not leaving time for a response, he rushed into his room. Mia looked at his door for a couple more seconds before making her way downstairs. Naruto leaned against the door with a sigh and said, that was starting to get uncomfortable. He looked into the room and saw Musabai in the process of changing and Akitsu still in her lab coat. He face-palmed and muttered, seriously? The next day, Naruto plus Musabai and Akitsu made their way to Training Ground 7 by roof hopping. Akitsu had finally found an outfit she liked. It was a white kimono with a slightly shorter than normal skirt that hung low on her shoulders and wide on her chest. She had a black obi around her waist and chains on it that held the different parts of her outfit together, including one chain that went around her neck and into her cleavage, which attached to the waist of her kimono. Naruto had spent some quality time with Mia explaining that particular fashion choice. It wasn't until Akitsu walked in and said a simple, I like them, that Mia finally dropped the subject, though she still sent the odd dirty look at the blonde Jinchuriki. Finally arriving at Training Ground 7, Naruto and his Sekirei approached a group of training posts where Sasuke and Sakura sat waiting. Hearing footsteps and seeing Naruto, Sakura got up to begin berating the blonde. Hey idiot, you're late, she trailed off, getting Sasuke's attention. He looked at her mildly curious and followed her gaze. At first all he saw was the blonde and prepared to give his usual response when he noticed the two beauties walking beside him. Seeing them, he felt himself get intensely angry at the blonde. He then immediately though, wait, why am I so angry? Am I? No, I'm an Uchiha. I have no reason to be jealous of anyone. He then looked at Naruto's Sekirei and thought, though if I did, that'd be a pretty good reason. The whole group covered their ears as Sakura shrieked, Hey Naruto, who the hell are they? Cleaning out his ear, Naruto looked at her disgruntled and said, friends. Glaring daggers, she pressed the issue. Okay, then why are they here? Looking at them then back to Sakura several times, he shrugged and said, they're kinda like summons. At that point Sasuke got irritated and a little suspicious. Damn, He suddenly gets smarter, stronger, and better at jutsu, and now this. Where the hell is the loser pulling all these tricks from? I'm an Uchiha. Those talents should be mine, not some blonde halfwits. Feeling a small amount of killing intent, Naruto turned around to see Sasuke glaring at him. Blinking several times, Naruto pulled on the lower lid of one and stuck out his tongue at the raven-haired loner. That made Sasuke get visibly agitated. Naruto suddenly felt an blunt pain on his head as Sekirei yelled at him, "What'd you do to Sasuke, stupid?" Hearing her master get insulted, Musabai stood up and pointed an accusatory finger at Sekirei and said, "Naruto is not stupid." Sekirei just leered and said, "Oh, and how would you know?" Musabai glared at her for a couple seconds and then put a finger on her chin and looked at the sky. Then she said, "Dunno." All three genin thought on similar lines. Naruto, so cute. Sasuke thought, I suddenly have the uncontrollable urge to strangle that loser. Sekirei thought, oh no, I can't let her look cuter than me. I must win Sasuke's heart. Not this big melon bimbo. Wait, big melons? Sekirei looked down subtly and started crying anime tears. Suddenly a burst of smoke erupted in the middle of the field, revealing Kakashi, lazy as always. He looked at the group and said, "Yo." Sekirei, still blushing from her perceived loss, found this a perfect distraction and pointed at Kakashi while yelling, "You're late, sensei." Am I? Sorry. I had to help an old lady cross the road, but then a mirror broke in front of me and I had to take the long way around. Naruto, Sekirei, Sasuke, Akitsu, and Musabai all thought the same thing. That was pathetic. Anyway, it's time for the test to begin. He pulled out 2 silver bells that jingled when they left his pocket. Your goal is to get one of these bells within 3 hours, and whoever doesn't get one has to go back to the academy, he said with an eye smile. What? All 3 genin shouted. Kakashi-sensei, you can't be serious, Sekirei pleaded. Kakashi looked at her seriously and said, dead serious. Sekirei then continued to speak, but there are only 2 bells, meaning one of us is going back to the academy. Sekirei suddenly got a sly grin and looked at Musabai. This is perfect. If I can get a bell, then stupid Naruto will get kicked off the team, and with him the bimbo too. Cha! Seeing her grin, Kakashi muttered, oh boy. Sasuke smirked, however. This is my perfect chance to prove to that loser how weak he really is. Naruto was deep in thought, however, much to Kakashi's surprise. Suddenly, something clicked. Naruto looked at his Sekirei, who nodded, seemingly understanding what he meant without speaking. Kakashi walked over and set a timer on one of the stumps. He looked at the group and noticed Naruto's knowing grin. He couldn't have figured it out, could he? Ignoring his thought, he spoke to the group. All right, you have 3 hours. Begin. Sasuke and Sekirei attempted to jump away, but before they could, Naruto called to his Sekirei, Musabai, Akitsu. Not even realizing what was going on, Sekirei and Sasuke soon found themselves being hoisted into the air. Kakashi just stared at them and blinked. Maybe he did. Off in the tree line, Naruto and his Sekirei, who were carrying the other 2, landed, dropping the 2 soon-to-be genin. Both turned around to yell at the blonde, but he put his finger up in a SSHH gesture. Sekirei looked at Sasuke for an answer. He looked at her and shrugged. What are you up to, loser? He asked, suspicious and annoyed. Momentarily glaring at Sasuke, Naruto said, doesn't this test seem weird to you guys? They each raised an eyebrow and nodded slowly. What's your point, idiot? Sekirei asked, insultingly. Musabai was ready to attack, but was being held back by an emotionless Akitsu. Naruto looked at Sekirei and asked, Sekirei, what's the normal setup for a genin team? Looking up in thought, Sekirei responded, 3 genin and a jounin. Why? Pointing up like an instructor, Naruto said, think about it. Why make a test that basically destroys that same, almost religious, structure? HN to drop dead weight? Sasuke asked with a smirk. Sekirei just beamed at his words and thought, that's it. Tell him, Sasuke. Cha. Naruto deftly suppressed his anger to a twitching eyebrow. That's not the point, he said through grit teeth. He sighed and asked, what's the most important thing for a shinobi team? Each had their own answer. Power, Sasuke said. Plenty of supplies? Sekirei asked more than answered. Naruto hung his head in dismay. Kurama, I don't know how much longer I can take this. Give the word and I'll fry the Uchiha brat. Kurama replied with enthusiasm. Right, how about no, Naruto said. Wiping the irritation from his face, Naruto said bluntly, no, it's teamwork. The two teens each raised an eyebrow. Naruto rapped his head against a tree. Musabai and Akitsu just looked confused. Sighing, Naruto explained, okay, think about it like this. What's the point in having a powerful team, like Sasuke said, or a well-prepared team, like Sekirei said, if they can't work together? That seemed to do it as the proverbial light bulb kicked on. Naruto smiled, feeling triumphant for the first time in a while. Snorting, Sasuke said, I suppose you have plan, loser? Naruto grinned. Yes, actually. Out in the training field, Kakashi was reading his book when he looked up and said, It's been awfully quiet for a while. I wonder what they're up to. Kakashi was brought out of his musings when a whistling sound made itself known. He turned around and jumped back in time to dodge several spikes made of ice. Ice? Must be Akitsu, he said to himself, remembering her winging. Right at that moment, the whole group, minus the Sekirei, ran out from tree cover behind Kakashi. Realizing this, Kakashi said quietly, A diversion? They seem to understand the basics, he said with an audible smile. As they ran, Sasuke made several hand signs. Fire style, Phoenix Flower Jutsu, he called as he spit a fireball that split into several. Next was Naruto, who made hand signs and called his attack. Wind style, Vacuum Bullets. Naruto spit several good-sized blasts of wind that hit the fireballs, sped them up, and made them bigger. Kakashi's eye went wide as a dinner plate, they using different chakra natures in tandem. Seeing his predicament, Kakashi made several signs of his own. Water style, Water Bullets, he called calmly, shooting moderately sized blasts of water at the fireballs. His eye went comically wide at that point. He was surprised enough that they could use elemental jutsu, surprised even more when they combined two elements that worked perfectly together, but he thought this was ridiculous. Inside the fireballs the entire time were dozens of shuriken that Kakashi was just barely able to dodge. He reacted instinctively when he heard a jingle. He shifted his weight to the left and kneed Naruto in the chest, shocked when what kicked wasn't just a shadow clone, but an exploding shadow clone. Sighing, Kakashi said, If this kid gives me any more surprises, I'll probably keel over. Ha! He felt two hands grab his shoulders and instinctually spun around to swat away his would-be attacker, only raise an eyebrow when no one was there. That distracted him long enough for Akitsu to freeze his feet to the ground, resulting in a quiet, uh-oh, from the spiky-haired Jonin. He turned around and nearly fainted. He saw two wispy arms made of chakra race towards him, grab the bells, and toss them in the air for Musabai to catch. Calming his heart rate, Kakashi said, Well, looks like you got me. Mind unfreezing me? He asked. Akitsu looked at Naruto, who nodded. She waved her hand and the ice became a puddle at Kakashi's feet. Looking at the grinning group and deciding to go for one more test, he asked the blonde, Now that you have the bells, who will you send back to the academy? Their joviality stopped as Naruto became thoughtful, Sekirei became frantic, and Sasuke got irritated. Looking at the Jounin, then the bells, back the Jounin several times. Naruto raised an eyebrow and said with a shrug and a sad smile, Hey Musabai, give me the bells. Confused, the excitable Sekirei complied and deposited the bells in her master's hands. Looking at him curiously, Kakashi prodded one more time. Well? Naruto looked from the bells to his comrades and said, I'll go. Everyone froze immediately. Akitsu looked at Naruto and asked, Are you certain? Naruto just winked at her in response, greatly confusing the ice Sekirei. Seeing this, Kakashi smiled and said, You all pass. Naruto's grin turned into a full-blown smile as Sekirei gave a hopeful laugh and Sasuke smirked. Kakashi looked at them and coughed into his hand, then told them, You see, this test was designed to test your ability to work as a team. But mine is a bit unorthodox, mainly because it forces you into a situation shinobi face almost every day. Sekirei looked at him with a puzzled expression and asked, What's that? With an eye smile he answered, The situation where you must choose between the success of the mission and your comrades. An old friend of mine once told me something. In the shinobi world, those who fail their missions are scum. Everyone, including the Sekirei, got a pouty and irritated expression in response. Lowering his head and closing his eyes in memory, Kakashi finished. But those who could abandon even one of their friends are even worse than scum. So you all passed, because your friends took greater importance than the objective. Now come on, I've got some things to do. The group then headed back to the village when Kakashi asked Naruto, "So, when did you figure it out?" Looking at the silver-haired man and grinning, he said, "Not completely until the end, but got the idea right in the beginning." Kakashi I smiled and thought, "You would be proud, sensei." In a dense forest near the Hidden Leaf village, several blurs hopped through the trees. A small shadow ran through the forest, the blurs hot on its trail. One jumped at it and face planted, hard. Eventually the shadow ducked into a gap in the trees and the three shadows stopped. "This is Naruto, target lost," he spoke into a small radio on his ear. A sigh was heard from the other end. "Fan out and search the area, locate and secure the target." All three blurs said, "Right," and jumped away. Naruto hopped along the tree line, searching for their target. He stopped when he heard a faint sound. He channeled chakra into his ears and heard what sounded like a child crying. Trying to decide between that lost child and their target didn't take long, and Naruto took off in the child's direction. Stopping periodically and looking around, Naruto cursed under his breath and said, "If I don't finish this quick, Kakashi-sensei is gonna kill me." He heard the crying more clearly right then and jumped down, finding a small blonde-haired girl in a white dress holding a gray cat with a bell around its neck. Seeing the cat, Naruto twitched an eyebrow and put a finger to his headset. "This is Naruto, I found the target, and something else." "What do you mean by else, Naruto?" Kakashi asked. Chuckling, Naruto responded, "You'll, see when you get here. I'm gonna be out of contact for a bit." Pausing for a moment, Kakashi said, "All right, Sasuke, Sakura, meet up on Naruto's position." Looking at the girl and the cat, Naruto scratched at his head and said, "Great, this is just weird." He walked forward slowly so as to not frighten the girl. Pointless, as the girl noticed him and immediately scuttled backwards into a crevice. Sighing, Naruto crouched down low and said softly, "Come here, I'm not gonna hurt you." The girl looked at him doubtfully for a moment before slowly standing up and walking equally slowly over to him, all while still carrying the cat. Naruto put his hand out for her to shake and asked kindly, "I'm Naruto, what about you?" Looking at him shyly, she put her hand in his and said timidly, "I'm Kusano, but you can call me Ku." Naruto gave her a soft smile when he heard the telltale signs of his team coming close. They hopped down in the small clearing behind him, scaring Kusano back on her behind, but never loosening her grip on the cat. Kakashi blinked a couple times trying to assess the situation. Then he pointed at the girl and asked, "Is this the else you were referring to?" Naruto chuckled lightly and said, "Yeah, this is it. Her name's Kusano, my guess is she's lost." Kakashi nodded and said, "Probably, we should take her to the Hokage Tower just in case." Kakashi then looked around and asked, "Where are Musabai and Akitsu?" Naruto got an exasperated expression with several hairs sticking out randomly and said with a sigh, "Crap." He turned to Kakashi and said, "Think you could take her? I've got to make sure those two haven't gotten themselves hurt." Kakashi nodded and knelt down to get the girl, but she eeped and bolted behind Naruto's leg, peering out slightly. Kakashi rubbed the back of his head with a chuckle and said, "I don't think she likes me." Naruto sighed and asked, "Ku, I've got to look for some people? And since you won't drop Tora, I can't take you with me." Kusano gained a sad expression and said, "But I like Kitty." Sakura glared at her and said, "Too bad." She reached down to grab Tora, but when she did, Kusano screamed in fright, causing several thick vines to shoot out of the ground and hoist Sakura into the air. Looking around, Sakura started to freak out. What the hell? Naruto and Kakashi shared a look and Kakashi nodded. Naruto face palmed and muttered, "Great, another Sekirei, but I don't think she has an Ashikabi." He looked at the cowering girl and then to Sakura and said, "Hey Ku, could let her down, pretty please?" Looking at him slightly afraid, she nodded and the vines released the pinkette, causing her land on the ground hard. She was about to hit her when Kakashi put a hand on her shoulder and shook his head. She crossed her arms and huffed. Sighing again, Naruto scratched his head in thought when something hit him like a proverbial brick. Naruto snapped his fingers and said, "Hey Ku, think you can hold Tora up so I can see her belly?" Kusano looked confused but complied. Sasuke watched him and asked, "What are you going to do, loser?" Naruto just gave him a toothy grin and said, "Just watch." He pulled out a scroll and unsealed the contents, a brush and an ink well. Naruto bit his thumb and mixed a little of his blood with the ink and stirred it. "Okay, Tora's probably gonna squirm, so hold her still." Intrigued, Kusano just nodded. Naruto then started drawing something on the cat's stomach, getting confused looks from everybody. After he finished his rather complex seal, he made half a hand sign and it faded away. He looked at Kusano and said, "All right, Ku, let Tora go." Everyone gasped and Kusano held the cat tighter. Sakura yelled and tried to hit him. "What the hell, stupid?" She tried because instead of hitting his head, she hit a very solid wall of ice. She then huddled in a corner nursing her bruised hand. Naruto looked up and saw an obliviously happy Musabi and an emotionless Akitsu. "Hey girls, about time." They nodded and Naruto turned back to Kusano and said, "Okay Ku, I need you to trust me. Go ahead and let Tora go." Disappointed, Kusano nodded sadly and let the cat go. It immediately bolted. Sasuke face-palmed and said, "Great loser, now I know you're an idiot." Naruto just grinned and pulled out a piece of paper with a seal on it. He placed his hand on it and said, "Summoning jutsu," resulting a large poof of smoke. Kakashi got wide-eyed and Sasuke got confused. Both expressions became more pronounced when the smoke cleared, revealing a very confused and disoriented Tora, who was immediately snatched up by a smiling Kusano. Sasuke tried to hide his surprise and asked, "How'd you do that, loser?" Naruto looked at him and said, "That seal was a summoning contract." Kakashi's eye nearly popped out of its socket in surprise. How did he get so good with seals, he thought. Sakura looked at him with a puzzled expression and asked, "Won't it just wash off?" Naruto gave her a confident look and responded, "No, I mixed it with my blood and bound and hit it with chakra, so that way it won't wash away or be noticed by others." Kakashi let out a small whistle and said, "That's pretty smart. Anyway, let's go to the Hokage Tower. Why don't you do that little trick for him too?" Kakashi finished with a somehow devious eye smile. "Sure," Naruto responded with an equally devious regular smile. The two of them then chuckled darkly with shadows over their eyes, greatly frightening Kusano, who dropped Tora and then screamed while running after her and confusing the others. A short time later, Kakashi's group plus a depressed Kusano arrived in the Hokage's mission room. The Hokage looked at them, but then quirked an eyebrow when he didn't see Tora. He heaved a heavy sigh and said, "Don't tell me you gave up." Kakashi shook his head. "Not exactly. Naruto," he said, motioning to the blonde. Naruto walked up with a grin and placed a piece of paper on the floor and summoned Tora with a puff of smoke. Hiruzen and Iruka, who was helping the Hokage sort out missions, nearly fell out of their chairs. "How?" Iruka asked in disbelief. Kakashi I smiled and said, "Naruto placed a summoning seal on her, so we can summon her whenever we want. Makes this mission nice and simple. Of course the seal only responds to Naruto's blood, and therefore only he can use it." "I see," the third replied, stroking his beard. He looked wearily at Kusano and asked, "Who's she?" Kakashi rubbed the back of his head and said sheepishly, "That's the thing, we don't know really. We just found her in the forest, and she was glued to Naruto." Sighing again, Hiruzen said, "I see. HM?" He looked up curiously when a child bolted through the door and ran at him. "Prepare to lose, old man." A young child with a long blue scarf and a gray helmet-like object on his head. He prepared to throw his wooden shuriken when he noticed Kusano and tripped over his scarf, landing face first with a loud thud. Everyone cringed slightly as the kid landed hard on his face. Oh, ooh," he repeated, rubbing his sore nose. He looked at Kusano and got a light blush when someone burst into the room. "Honorable grandson, what are you doing?" A man in a black outfit, a black bandana and round black glasses with a deep voice said in shock. The man took notice of Naruto and pushed his glasses up his nose and asked, "What's he doing here?" spitting the word he like poison. Naruto gave the man light glare, but was stopped by Kakashi putting his hand on his shoulder. sighing again, hers and said, "He just got back from a mission." Naruto looked down at the kid and walked over to him, getting a cringe from the black-dressed man, and asked him, "Hey kid, you alright?" The boy huffed and said, "I'm fine. I don't need you worrying about me." A vein popping in his head, Naruto grabbed the boy by the collar and snarled, "And what's so bad about me, huh?" The boy was completely frightened by the small amount of killer intent Naruto was releasing subconsciously. "Unhand him, beast. He is the honorable grandson of the third Hokage," the weird man yelled. Naruto squinted at the boy and raised an eyebrow. The boy grinned with a righteous chuckle and said, "What now? You aren't gonna hit me because the Hokage's my grandpa, just like everyone else." Everyone, minus Naruto, the boy, Kusano, and the weirdo thought, "Bad move." Naruto scowled at the boy and yelled, "I don't care if he's your grandmother," then immediately hit him square on the head. The weirdo prepared to charge and yelled, "You damn beast!" but was immediately stopped when a hand grabbed him firmly at the base of the neck while his feet were frozen in place. He looked forward to see Akitsu in front of him with ice crystals swirling around her hand. Then behind him to see Musabai glaring while grabbing him at a pressure point, effectively paralyzing him until she let go. Seeing this, the boy could only say, "Wow." Kakashi thought with a cold sweat, "I didn't even see them move. I'd hate to be the receiving end of those two in a serious fight." Naruto grinned at the strange man and then said, "All right girls, let him go." "Understood," Akitsu said, thawing his feet. "Right," Musabai said with her scowl turned into a smile as she released the man, who crumpled to the floor like a stack of books. The boy then looked at Naruto in amazement and asked, "Can you do that?" "I can do what Musabai did, but not what Akitsu did with her ice," Naruto responded with a shrug. The boy's face beamed and he said, "Teach me." Naruto just blinked once, twice. "Huh? I asked you to teach me. I want to be that good," he said with a bright smile. Naruto immediately became disheveled and said, "Sorry kid, I'm not much for teaching." The boy persisted however, "Aw come on, if you're that good, teaching should be easy. And it's Konohamaru." "What is?" he asked. "My name, it's Konohamaru." "Oh," Naruto said, then sighed. "Look Konohamaru, I'm good but I don't think I can or have time to teach you. I've got my missions to do." Musabai raised a finger and said, "What about your shadow clone thing?" Naruto gave her a mild glare and grunted, not helping. Konohamaru then waved to Naruto, requesting to speak quietly. Naruto raised an eyebrow, but knelt down and put a hand to his ear. Konohamaru then said quietly, "Besides, I want to look cool for that girl over there." Naruto pulled back a little with shit-eating grin and said with exaggerated gestures, "Well, if that's your reason, I could make a little time to help." Konohamaru had stars in his eyes. "You mean it?" Naruto gave him a wide grin. "Never. I would never allow the honorable grandson to be tainted by that beast," the man yelled, having finally regained his motor functions, only to lose them again when Musabai hit him on the head. Konohamaru stuck his tongue out at the man and said, "You suck, Abisu-sensei. At least with boss, I'll learn some real jutsu." The now named Abisu just laid in a pile on the floor and grumbled something about demon brats. Kakashi coughed to get Naruto's attention, then told him, "We don't have any more missions today, so why don't you go train with Konohamaru? I can finish the rest here." Naruto nodded, then turned to Kusano and said, "Wanna come with us, Ku?" Kusano nodded happily and jumped on his back with a giggle. Konohamaru looked at his own back and sighed. Later, the trio was at Training Ground 7 when Naruto looked at Konohamaru and said, "Okay, the first thing I need to know is how far you are in the academy." Konohamaru thought for a minute and said, "We just started learning about Katra." Looking disheveled again, Naruto said, "Chakra." "Huh?" Konohamaru asked, completely confused. "It's called chakra, not Katra," Naruto said, like explaining the most basic thing of ninjutsu to a child, which he was. Konohamaru put his hand behind his head and laughed in embarrassment and said, "Oh, oops." Naruto sighed again and said to Konohamaru, "Next, how much has Four Eyes taught you?" Konohamaru asked, "Who's that?" Naruto shrugged with a chuckle and said, "It's my personal nickname for Abisu." "Ooh-oh." Konohamaru looked down at the ground with glare and a huff and said, He hasn't taught me anything. Just geography, politics, and other stupid stuff like that. That got Naruto's attention and asked, "Why is he teaching you that?" Konohamaru huffed again and said, "He says it's preparation for being Hokage. But I don't want to learn that stuff. I want to learn cool jutsu. Ibisu-sensei says learning from him is the shortcut to Hokage." Naruto released a heavy laugh and rubbed his nose and asked, "He did he? Look kid, I got bad news for you. There isn't a shortcut to being Hokage." Konohamaru gave him a puzzled look. "How do you know that?" Naruto chuckled and gave a wide, fox-like grin and said, "'Cause I want to be Hokage too. There's no shortcut to it either. You gotta work hard, train hard, and learn hard to be Hokage. It takes blood, sweat, and tears, not some pathetic excuse for a sensei giving you orders." Konohamaru was in awe by that point. "So then, can you help me get there?" "I'll help you a little, but too much and you'll get the title before me. Can't have that, can we?" "Well, let's get started. I assume Four Eyes has at least taught you basic chakra control." Konohamaru nodded and their training began. The training consisted mainly of chakra control exercises, specifically tree climbing, and only lasted a couple hours as Konohamaru sprawled out exhausted on the ground afterward. "Geez kid, didn't think you sputter out so quick," Naruto said while leaning against a tree with a lopsided grin. Looking up from his sprawled position, Konohamaru failed at an attempt to glare at the blonde and said, "Come on boss. This stuff is hard. Plus my body is sore from falling." Naruto chuckled and said, "Yup, mine was too. This stuff is hard, but you should be able to do it." "No way. I'm too tired," he said between huffs. Naruto rubbed his chin and hummed in thought, then looked at Kusano with a conniving grin. Seeing his grin, Kusano immediately ran to a tree and huddled down with big, worried eyes. Naruto gave her a nicer smile and asked, "Hey Ku, could you make a medium-sized tree?" Looking at him with light confusion, she nodded uneasily and put a hand on the ground. A faint green light emitted from the ground in front of her, and a large green tree shot out of the ground. Naruto looked at Konohamaru with a leer and said, "Now come on Konohamaru, Ku made this tree specially for you. You won't disappoint her by not climbing it, will you?" Konohamaru shot up and pointed at Naruto with vexation and yelled, "You're evil!" Naruto grinned slyly and pointed at the tree. Konohamaru grumbled and pumped chakra into his legs and ran at the tree. He got about a third of the way up when a voice broke his concentration, sending him to the ground with a thud. "Honorable grandson," Ibisu called in a fury as he ran to the group. Seeing Konohamaru on the ground dirtied and bruised, Ku cowering against a tree and Naruto grinning madly, he assumed the worst. "You fiend, prepare for my wrath." Naruto quirked an eyebrow as Ibisu lunged at him. His face became annoyed and Naruto didn't move as a blue chakra arm sprouted from his back and lunged at Ibisu, socking him right in the jaw. "You don't really think you can beat me, do you?" he asked flatly. Standing up while nursing his bruised jaw, Ibisu scowled and said, "Listen here you beast. I will not tolerate yo-ah." His speech was cut off when Musabai grabbed the back of his neck and squeezed it with a scowl. Musabai glared at him with vindication and said, "You will not insult Naruto that way. I tolerate it from his teammate because he calls her a friend, but I won't stand by while you attack my Ashikabi." Naruto could feel her emotions through the mental bond and was astounded at the pure rage she had. It made him feel strangely happy that someone was so angered by him being insulted. Without realizing it, he cracked a smile. Ibisu glared back at the incensed Sekirei and managed to force out, You dare defend that demon." At that point, Musabai gained a tick mark and tossed Ibisu off to the horizon, only for Ibisu to turn into smoke. Standing nearby on a tree, Ibisu pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose and said, "Please, did you really expect me fall for the same move twice?" He jumped down, looked at Naruto and declared, "I will defeat you and rescue the honorable grandson." Musabai got ready to act but stopped when Naruto put his hand up with a serious expression. Disappointed, Musabai nodded and stood back placid. Naruto looked at Ibisu and said, "Look, Four Eyes, I've got a bone to pick with you." With a snicker, Ibisu said, "Ooh, I'm so scared." Narrowing his eyes, Naruto said, "You've been telling Konohamaru this whole time that you know the shortcut to being Hokage." Performing his normal gesture, Ibisu said, "Of course, because I do. Learning from me, he will reach that goal in exceptional time." Naruto snickered a bit, eventually transferring into a full-blown laugh with his head thrown back as well. Then he glared at Ibisu and yelled, "Do you take me for a fool?" At the blonde's sudden conviction, Ibisu curled back. "There is no easy path to Hokage. The only way to get there is the path of the true shinobi, to persevere and fight to the top with hard work," he said with confidence and conviction. Musabai suddenly felt herself heating up while watching him. Ibisu scoffed and said, "What would you know about hard work?" Naruto's fists clenched and he hollered, "That's it. I've had it with you people. This is my hard work at fruition." Ibisu honestly reeled back in fear as the blonde charged at amazing speeds. Ibisu reacted immediately and jumped into the air. Naruto followed and put his hand into a cup shape. As he did, chakra started to collect and swirl in his hands. Ibisu looked in shock and said, "Impossible, that's the rasengan," Naruto shouted as a ball of swirling chakra formed in his hand and thrust it at Ibisu's stomach. The rasengan tore Ibisu's shirt and meshed to ribbons and ground at his skin, twisting and gnarling it. Naruto then released the jutsu and it exploded outwards, sending them both flying. Naruto landed on the ground perfectly fine. Ibisu crashed with a loud thud. Konohamaru was in awe at what he just saw. His sensei, who constantly told him how powerful he was just thrashed, which meant Ibisu was either pathetic or Naruto was extremely powerful. Konohamaru immediately went with the second choice. Konohamaru ran up to Naruto along with Kusano and both jumped and cheered. "Big brother Naruto, that was awesome." Naruto looked at him slightly confused. "Big brother?" Konohamaru nodded energetically. "You're so cool, so I want you to be my big brother and teach me how to be awesome too." Naruto sighed in exasperation. He had honestly hoped that was a one-time event. He scratched his cheek and asked, "You sure?" Konohamaru nodded and Kusano hopped at him. Me too, me too." All right, yeesh," Naruto said with a placating motion. Musabai and Akitsu walked over to the limp Ibisu and Musabai tapped him lightly with her foot. When he twitched, she ducked behind Akitsu. Akitsu turned around to Musabai and asked, "Should we get rid of him?" Musabai put her finger to chin in thought and then nodded. Out in the village, Kakashi was walking down the road when he heard screaming. He looked up to see Ibisu flying like a missile. Putting his hand up to block the sun, he followed Ibisu's path with his eyes. He went pretty far. I'd give it an 8 out of 10, Kakashi said lazily while he was walking away. After another short training stint with Konohamaru and Kusano, Naruto and his Sekirei prepared to walk home when Kusano grabbed his sleeve. He looked down and saw her worried expression. He was about to ask her what was wrong when a rather effeminate boy with silver hair ran up to them and called, "Ku." Kusano turned around and ran to the boy and said, "Big brother," and enveloped him in a big hug. Naruto smiled contently and looked to his Sekirei and said, "I think she'll be fine. Come on, let's go." Musabai and Akitsu nodded as they left. The group arrived at Izumo Inn shortly thereafter. Soon after they arrived, while Naruto was in the living room watching television with Akitsu and Musabai, he heard someone come in. "Miya, I'm home," the voice called. After another few seconds, a young woman with waist-length brown hair tied into a short ponytail on one side, wearing a purple tee with a star on the chest and tight capriced jeans walked in. The first thing Naruto noticed, much to his dismay, was her large chest, causing him to blush. The girl noticed him and said, "Oh, you must be the new tenant. I'm Uzum." Naruto nodded dumbly, with the blush still present, and said, "Yeah, I'm Naruto." His Sekirei could feel his lust through the bond and glared at him, though Akitsu's normally emotionless face had the eyebrows moved down ever so slightly. Naruto sputtered once he felt their irritation and tried to calm them. Uzum couldn't suppress a giggle and thought, "He's gonna be so much fun," ending with an evil snicker. She walked over and said with a teasing tone, "So Naruto, how'd you get these two beauties, HM?" Naruto stuttered for a moment before Musabai spoke. "We're Naruto's sec." She was cut off by Naruto putting his hand over her mouth. He laughed abashedly and said, "Just ignore her. We've been friends for a while, that's all." He then leaned into Musubai and whispered, "The Sekirei plan is a secret, remember?" Musubai knuckled herself in the head lightly and nodded. Yuzume raised an eyebrow, but then got hit by a ladle. Behind her, Mia stood with her trademark sickeningly sweet smile. "You know, Yuzume, all I ask is that you call when you stay out late like that." Yuzume rubbed her sore head and laughed weakly. "Yeah, oops. Sorry, Mia." Mia's smile became somewhat normal again as she said, "As long as you're sorry, it's fine." With that, she walked into her room. Yuzume grumbled and said, "Geez, damn woman. All I did was go out drinking with Kazehana again, and this is what I get, grrr." Naruto put his arms on the back of the couch, rested his head on it, and said nonchalantly while picking at one of his blonde locks, "You know, I'm pretty sure she's just worried." Yuzume gained an exasperated look and muttered, "Yeah, about her money." "So, Yuzume," Naruto said, causing the woman to roll on her back and look at him, displaying her assets in full view, but getting disappointed when he seemed not to notice. Not that he didn't. "What can you tell me about the other tenants?" Yuzume sat up and wrapped her knees in her arms and asked, "Why you want to know?" Naruto shrugged and answered, "Just human curiosity, I guess." Yuzume put a finger on her chin and said while in thought, "Well, there's Kagari. He works as a host in a club in the middle of town. Then there's Kazehana, though she only spends about half her time here, don't know what she does the rest of the time though. Lastly, there's me, and I'm a private contractor." Naruto raised an eyebrow and asked, "Like carpentry?" Yuzume lightly bonked him on the head and said, "No, silly, does this body look like it does carpentry?" while motioning her hands down her sides. With narrowed eyes, Naruto said accusingly, "I'm not going to answer that." Shrugging, Yuzume said, "Too bad. If you gave the right answer, I might have let you see a little." She finished with a wink, getting the embarrassed blush from him she wanted. Then she continued, "I basically do whatever anyone's willing to pay me for. Within reason, of course, though it's mainly just children's parties." Naruto gave her an accusing stare and said, "So like a jack of all trades, huh? Wouldn't you be more fit for adult parties, though?" Yuzume just laughed and said, "I'll take that as a compliment. No, I actually have a rather unusual ability." Naruto was intrigued. "What is it?" Standing up, Yuzume unrolled a bit of cloth and draped it over her arm. After a couple seconds, the cloth started to wiggle and then levitated, wrapping around her arm without touching it. She moved it around and it floated wherever she commanded. Musubai was in sheer bliss and clapped happily. Akitsu had her normal bored expression. Naruto, on the other hand, had a suspicious look. He thought, "That certainly doesn't look like any KK Genkai I know." "Kurama?" Yawning, Kurama replied, "She's one of them." Knowing what he meant, Naruto gave a mental nod. "So, she's a Sekirei. I wonder who her ashikabi is. Hopefully they're willing to work together," he thought while watching her. After several motions, Yuzume accidentally stepped on the cloth, which tightened around her arm, causing her to slip. Closing her eyes and waiting for the dull thud and pain of hitting the floor, she was surprised when she didn't feel it. Cracking an eye open in curiosity, she noticed Naruto above her with a worried expression. She then realized he caught her, the realization of that and how fast he was, plus his intense gaze and proximity. Yuzume's eyes snapped open and she had a deep pink blush. After a second longer, her blush deepened and spread to her entire face. Her breathing got strained and shallow and her eyes became half-lidded. She could also feel the mark on her back burning like a brand. Seeing her face and thinking she was sick, Naruto shook her lightly and said, Yuzume, you alrig HMMPFFF." He was cut off when she placed a hand on his face and brought him into a deep, passionate kiss. "Wah!" Musubai cried in astonishment. Akitsu only said one thing, "Ah, jealous." Almost immediately, Yuzume's back started to glow with a white light, and then multiple wings resembling cloth veils sprouted from her back. After they separated, Yuzume had a satisfied look while Naruto was confused. After what just happened sunk in, he cried to the heavens, "Not another one, not another one," Naruto shouted to the heavens. He had just winged another Sekirei, no, 10 Yuzume. He had thought his Sekirei would stop at 2 with Musubai and Akitsu. He just discovered that was wrong. Yuzume stared at him with a confused expression and said, "What?" Sighing deeply, Naruto rubbed his temple and said, I just wasn't expecting another Sekirei. Yuzun gave him a slightly depressed expression and asked, was that bad? With a twitching eyebrow, Naruto stood, scratched his cheek and said, no, just unexpected. Then he looked at her and asked, guess that means you're my third Sekirei, huh? Yuzun immediately stood up and chirped, yep. Ooh, Naruto turned and saw Musabai glaring with an indignant expression. Of course her face didn't look threatening in the least. Naruto curled back a bit and thought, holy shit, how can she be that damn cute? The screen door to the room opened and Mia walked in and asked, may I ask what all the commotion is? Musabai pointed at Yuzun and said with adorable rage, Naruto just winged Yuzun. Yuzun jumped a bit when Mia gave her a sickeningly sweet smile, covered her mouth with her sleeve and said, much too sweet, oh, how did this happen? You do know lewd acts are forbidden, don't you? Naruto's face turned when something seemingly impossible happened. The air was filled with the sound of wooden blocks clacking together, a large purple aura surrounded Mia's body and a Hanya mask floated out from behind her back. Everyone in the room huddled in one spot shaking with fear. Ha, this is killing intent, Kurama said to Naruto. Look Kurama, unless you can help, be quiet. Kurama laughed and said, allow me to release some killing intent and that thing will go away. Naruto screamed in his mind, do it. After getting a little more courage, Naruto stood up and a red aura released from his body. Both Mia and her Hanya looked at him slightly confused. Then, out from behind Naruto, the silhouette of a massive, multi-tailed monster with glowing red eyes appeared. It roared at the Hanya, causing it to curl back. Mia increased her aura, causing a second mask with a waving snake-like tongue and bleeding eyes to appear. Despite releasing Kurama's aura, Naruto was sweating and released more. This time, the beast waved its tails wildly and growled, causing blood-colored smoke to flow from its mouth. Mia's Hanya were unaffected, and she gave a smirk under her sleeve. Naruto released just a little more of Kurama's killing intent. Yuzun and the others were about ready to go unconscious from the suppressive feeling being released by both people. Yuzun then thought, great, I got an Ashikabi who can imitate the Hanya of the north. Lucky me. With the final release of killing intent, the beast curled back a clawed hand and swiped at the Hanya masks, shattering them on contact, surprising Mia and causing her to jump back in both surprise and fear. Realizing the masks were gone, Naruto suppressed Kurama's killing intent. Naruto turned with grin and said, glad I got that he screamed, seeing his Sekirei unconscious from the miniature Cold War. Shaking them, Naruto said, oh, come on, wake up. Sighing, Naruto muttered flatly, crap. After the situation calmed down, Mia prepared dinner and everyone went to the table. Naruto, could you go check on Kagari? She asked. He nodded and went over to the hallway and knocked on Kagari's door. After a second, the door opened and Kagari looked at Naruto with an exhausted expression. You okay, man? He asked, seeing the disheveled state of the silver-haired man. Kagari looked at him tiredly and nodded. Yeah, long hours, that's all. Naruto gave him a sympathetic look and said, okay anyway, Mia wanted me to tell you it's time for dinner. Kagari nodded and said, I'll be out in a bit. He didn't wait for a response and shut the door. Naruto returned to the dining room and told Mia he said he'll be out in a bit. Mia nodded and motioned for him to sit down. When he did, something peculiar happened. Akitsu sat down on his left with her emotionless stare. What surprised him was when Yuzun and Musabai glared and argued about who sat next to Naruto. Naruto then thought, is this what Sasuke goes through? I think I just gained a new level of respect for the jerk and sympathy too. After several seconds, Mia appeared behind and knocked them both on the head with a ladle. She then suggested, how about you alternate? Musabai looked at her puzzled and then scrunched her nose in concentration. Alternate? Naruto sighed and explained. Alternate, it means to switch. Bopping her open left palm with her right fist in understanding, Musabai said, so you mean me and Yuzumu switch every meal? Wait, what about Akitsu? Naruto answered her nonchalantly. Akitsu is special. Uo, that's not fair, Musabai said, puffing out her cheeks. Naruto sighed and said, She was a scrapped number, remember? He asked with a sympathetic look. Looking slightly depressed, Musabai said, okay. Dinner went by uneventfully, except for Naruto feeling like he was being watched. What confused him and made him suspicious was when he asked Miya. Both she and Uzum became uncomfortable and changed the subject. Deciding it best to ask about it later, Naruto was going to ask another question when there was a knock at the door. I'll get it, Miya said and walked gracefully over to the door. Once she opened it, she narrowed her eyes and said annoyed, "Oh, it's you." "Come on, I just need to speak to someone," a lazy voice said. Hearing the familiar lazy drawl, Naruto and his Sekirei went over to the door and sure enough, standing in the doorway with his two Sekirei was Kakashi. "Yo," he said with a wave. "What are you doing here, Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto asked. Kakashi nodded and was about to speak when he noticed Uzum standing next to him. Without speaking, he pointed to her. Following his point, Naruto looked at Uzum, turned back to Kakashi and nodded with a sigh. Kakashi gave a mock nice guy pose, including a glint on his headband. Naruto looked at him exasperated and said flatly, "Bite me." Kakashi ignored his insult and said, "I just thought I'd let you know we'll be getting a mission tomorrow. It's C rank since I decided moving up a little might not be a bad idea." Naruto got sparkles in his eyes and said, "Are you serious, sensei?" Kakashi I smiled and nodded. "We're going to have a big group though." Naruto raised an eyebrow and asked, "Why?" I smiling again, Kakashi said, "We'll both bring our Sekirei with us." Naruto had an expressionless face. "Oh, wait, what? Is that a problem?" Musabai asked with finger up to her lips in a pouty expression. Naruto twitched an eyebrow and sighed. "No, it's fine." "Yay," Musabai said, pumping her arms in the air. "Well, I'll see you at the Hokage Tower tomorrow." "Bye," Kakashi said and walked away. Miya sighed and said to Naruto, "I pity you for having him as your sensei." Naruto was confused and asked, "Why?" "He's lazy, a pervert, and tends to be rude," Miya said, never losing a bit her grace and poise. With a disgruntled look, Naruto said, "You don't hold back, do you?" Miya gave him her too sweet smile and said, "I could say more." Naruto put a hand up. "Nah, I'm good." Naruto's sleep was disturbed by a dream that night. In his dream, his was standing on the water in a near infinite ocean. He looked around and saw nothing but water. After walking for a long time, Naruto stopped when he felt the water shift. Suddenly, a vindictive voice spoke out. "Filthy monkey, why hath thee approached me?" Naruto raised an eyebrow and said, "What? Do not playeth the fool. I am no stranger to thy despicable ways. I shall destroy thee and proveth my power." "Huh?" Suddenly, the water started shifting violently, and a dragon burst from the water and swallowed him whole. "Ah!" Naruto shot up and yelled in a cold sweat, unknowingly knocked Uzum to the floor. "Naruto, what's wrong?" Musabai called to him. Naruto was trying to calm himself with deep breaths. Uzum sat up and said, "Hey bro, that hurt." Naruto pointed at her said, "What are you doing here?" Uzum pressed her arms together doing nice things to her chest and winked. "You didn't like it?" Naruto's face curled in frustration and his face turned bright red. He tried to argue, but ended up just sputtering. Uzum waved at him and giggled. "I'm just playing. I don't know, I think it just happened." Sighing and rubbing the back of his head, Naruto grumbled. Then he perked up and said, "Wait, what time is it?" Uzum looked slightly puzzled and said, 8, I think. Naruto shot up and screamed, "Oh crap, I have to get to the old man's office." He then began running through the room getting ready. Uzum looked at him puzzled. "Old man?" Akitsu said emotionless as usual, "The Hokage." Uzum quirked an eyebrow, then snapped her fingers. "All right, pervert mask showed up last night." Akitsu and Musabai said in unison, "Pervert mask?" Uzum stood and shrugged. "My pet name for Kakashi." "Oh," they said together. Naruto came out of the bathroom in his orange tracksuit and looked at his Sekirei and said disgruntled, "Why aren't you guys dressed?" "What should we wear?" Musabai asked. Naruto's head slumped. "Your normal outfits are fine, and it shouldn't be that big of an issue." "Actually, it is a bit for me," Uzum said with an embarrassed chuckle. Why is that? Naruto asked. Because I need a specific outfit for combat, but I don't think you want me wearing it under normal circumstances. Naruto rubbed his chin and said, well, let's see it and I'll decide. Yuzume shrugged and winked. I think you'll like it, bro. Naruto twitched an eyebrow. After several minutes, Yuzume came back and Naruto paled. Instead of her normal star shirt and capris jeans, she wore white cloth in multiple pieces. On her chest was a piece of cloth that wrapped over her neck, barely covered her melons, wrapped just below them and around her body. A short white skirt that wrapped around her waist and buttoned, long white boots that came up to the middle of her thighs, long white gloves that came to the middle of her biceps, and multiple long white pieces of free-floating cloth that circled around her arms and torso. Naruto could do little to hide his nosebleed at her outfit. Seeing this, she decided to have a little fun and wiped the blood away with one of her cloths. Naruto looked distant for a second before clearing his throat and saying, wear your normal outfit, I'll put that in a storage scroll. Laughing at his discomposure, Yuzume winked and said, sure, I'll be right back. Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose and thought to Kurama, I swear these Sekirei are going to kill me. Kurama chuckled and said, I enjoy seeing the torture these females are able to put you through. Naruto's eyebrow twitched and he responded, I'd like to see you in my situation. I wouldn't be in this situation, stupid, he said flatly. Fair enough. Naruto, you ready to go? Musubai asked expectantly. Naruto nodded and headed out with them. Sasuke and Sakura stood in the Hokage's mission room irritated. Sakura looked at Kakashi and asked irked, where is he? Kakashi shrugged and said, probably got lost. Sasuke twitched an eyebrow and asked, lost on the road of life, you mean? Kakashi just smiled. The door opened and Sakura, the moment she saw his hair, yelled, you're late. Another one? She shouted, seeing his extra companion. Naruto chuckled uneasily and nodded. Yup, this is Yuzume. Yuzume waved and giggled to the group. Sasuke looked at him with a tick mark and thought, he's really starting to piss me off. At least I know I'm stronger. Naruto walked up to the group and noticed Hiruzen and Iruka had shocked expressions. He waved at them and asked, aren't we here for a mission? Hiruzen cleared his throat and said, all right. After a discussion with Kakashi, we decided that it would be acceptable for you to have a C-rank mission. So the mission I've picked is for you to escort the client to the land of waves. Client? All three genin asked in unison. Hiruzen nodded, send him in. The door opened and a disheveled, drunk old man wearing a straw hat and holding a beer bottle walked in. Speaking in between hiccups, he said, seriously? These brats are my bodyguards? They're just pipsqueaks. Although, I don't mind the pretty ladies. He finished with a lecherous grin and equally lecherous snicker. Naruto's Sekirei glared at the old man, while Naruto himself demonstrated his new talent for materializing Kurama's silhouette for intimidation. A red aura emanated from his body along with a healthy dose of killing intent. Bits of the aura coagulated into a red smoky apparition resembling Kurama's head. It grinned ominously, baring its many sharp fangs. Iruka and Hiruzen were in shock. Sasuke looked at him in a combination of fear and rage. Sakura was panting heavily and struggling to stand. The old man, due to being already drunk, was on the floor about to vomit. Kakashi looked at him with a mix of shock and irritation. Looks like I'm going to have a talk with Miya when we get back. Wonderful. He coughed into his hand and said, Naruto, let's not kill the client before we even leave, okay? Naruto looked at him annoyed but nodded and complied. The fox apparition disappeared and his aura dissipated. Kakashi sighed and looked at his team and said, all right everyone, meet at the front gate in an hour. With that he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Musubai looked at Naruto and asked, is he getting Hibiki and Hikari? Naruto nodded and said, probably. Sakura was confused and asked, who are they? Naruto snickered and said, you'll see. Sakura puffed her cheeks in annoyance and tried to ask Sasuke for a date as they left. They arrived at the gate just on time and waited for nearly an hour. Sakura growled and asked to no one in particular, where is he? Naruto sat in a tree nonchalantly and said, are you really surprised, Sakura? Sakura looked up and huffed, then asked, what are you doing up there anyway? Naruto shrugged. I just like it up high. Sakura's disgruntled look became curious, and she asked, what do you mean? Naruto thought for a minute and shrugged. Dunno, I've just always had this innate desire to fly. I like being high up because it's the closest thing to that. Sakura looked at the blonde with newfound respect. Sasuke couldn't decide if he should be annoyed or impressed, so he just went, HN. After a few more minutes, Kakashi showed up and Sakura was about to yell when she noticed the two women at his side. Sakura suddenly got very annoyed and asked, what's going on here? Kakashi, I smiled and said, it's a secret. Sakura responded with a twitching eyebrow. After that, the group started their trip and had been walking at a civilian pace for roughly an hour. Naruto was walking along on the left side with Uzumaki and Sasuke and noticed a couple of puddles on the ground. He thought for a moment and realized it hadn't rained in several days. He walked closer to Sasuke and nudged his elbow. What do you want, loser? Sasuke asked rudely. Naruto shot a quick glare and subtly pointed to the puddles. Sasuke was at first confused but quickly realized what was going on and nodded. Naruto looked back at Uzumaki and then to the puddles. Knowing what he meant, one of the pieces of cloth she had wrapped around her arm and under her shirt extended and tapped Kakashi's shoulder. He looked and noticed the odd floating cloth which motioned to the puddles. Looking back at Naruto's group, he nodded. Suddenly, the puddles burst and two shinobi came out. With special gauntlets they had on their right arms, serrated chains with kunai on the ends shot out and wrapped around Kakashi. Grinning under their masks, the two shinobi pulled the chain, slicing Kakashi to pieces. Seeing this, Sakura was able to only scream. Reacting instantly, Hikari and Hibiki lunged at one attacker, attempting to hit him with an electrified double punch. Knowing electricity was more potent than water, which he used, he jumped and narrowly dodged. Naruto looked at Musabi and Akitsu and ordered, protect Sakura and Tazuna. They nodded silently and stood around the two. Sasuke and Naruto flanked their target. He tried to escape, but Uzumaki wrapped him in cloth. Sorry pal, you're not going anywhere, she said with a smirk. The man had shoulder-length, wild brown hair and dark-colored eyes, wearing a rebreather with one filter along with his gauntlet on his left arm. He also wore a camouflage suit with bandages around his waist and a headband with the hidden mist symbol and two large horns. I know you, Naruto said, causing him to raise an eyebrow. You're Mizu of the Akuma brothers. The man snickered. Good to know our presence is felt all the way out here. With a swift motion, his clawed arm sliced through Uzumi's cloth, causing her to stumble back. Naruto rushed at Mizu and threw a mid-height punch. Seeing his speed, Mizu thought, for a genin, this brat's fast. He was barely able to dodge the punch and retaliated with his clawed arm. Naruto put his hand on the gauntlet and propelled himself up. Then, in a swift motion, brought his legs forward, hit Mizu in the chin with his foot. After landing on the ground, Naruto looked at Sasuke and said, I can handle Mizu, go deal with Gazu. Annoyed at the blonde trying to order him around, Sasuke scoffed and jumped towards the man. Gazu stood at a stalemate with Hikari and Hibiki. Every time they tried to punch him, he dodged, and every time they tried to shock him, he tossed several senbon or kunai that redirected the current. He couldn't attack him because he would get shocked. The twins were about to attack again when Sasuke showed up. He looked at the man and saw he had shoulder-length dark brown hair and similarly dark eyes to his brother. He wore a rebreather with two filters and his clawed gauntlet on his right arm. He also wore a camouflage outfit with bandages on his waist, but wore a ragged cape over that with a mist headband with one horn. Gazu snickered and said, Look at this, the kid wants to play hero. How touching. Sasuke growled at the insult and charged, throwing several kunai and jumped high in the air. Ha, you really think that'll work? Gazu taunted. He shot his chain out to deflect the kunai and then whipped it up to hit Sasuke and seemingly sliced him in half, only for it to be a substitution. Not bad, now try this. Gazu thrust his arm forward and the chain shot at blinding speeds that Sasuke barely dodged, getting his sleeve cut in the process. Sasuke formed several hand signs and then took a big breath. Fire style, fireball jutsu. He exhaled, sending a fireball towards Gazu, who just scoffed. Water style, water wall. Gazu placed his hand on the ground and a wall of water shot up, dissipating the fireball. What Gazu didn't expect was the multiple shuriken that were in the fireball that shot through the wall. He barely managed to bring up his gauntlet and block them. Sasuke jumped over the wall and brought an axe kick down, which Gazu stopped by grabbing his leg and slamming him against a tree, causing him to cough up a little blood. Naruto saw this and tched at the sight and jumped over another chain, then made several shadow clones which circled Mizu. Mizu snickered and swung his chain around, dispelling the clones easily. "Is that damn shadow clone all you got, brat?" Two large shuriken barreled towards him on either side at high speeds. Mizu clicked his tongue and jumped over the shuriken. Behind him, one shuriken transformed into Naruto in a puff of smoke and grabbed the other one as it came close. Mizu saw the Naruto in front of him disappear just in time to see the large shuriken impale him through the midsection, which caused him to cough up blood into his rebreather that he promptly choked on. Naruto sighed in relief and said, "Glad that's over." He looked at Sasuke to see him still imbrued in his battle. He was about to help when he saw it end. Sasuke struggled to dodge every strike from Gazu's arm, which were more aggressive since he was mad at his brother's death. Gazu then launched himself at Sasuke and tried to impale Sasuke through the torso, only to be clotheslined by Kakashi, knocking him out cold. Kakashi looked back at his student and asked, "You all right?" Sasuke scoffed and turned away. When he saw Naruto had beaten his opponent single-handed, he clenched his fists in rage. "How? I'm an Uchiha. Why does he always seem to be ahead of me?" he yelled in his mind. "I'll take that as a yes," Kakashi said as he tied up an unconscious Gazu. Kakashi gave an intense glare to their charge Tazuna. He walked over to him and said, "You have a lot of explaining to do. C ranks don't entail contact with Chunin-level ninja. That would make it at least B rank. So, care to elaborate what you know?" Tazuna pulled down his hat and said somberly, "It wasn't our intention to deceive you. We're a poor nation that couldn't afford anything higher than C rank, and we could barely afford that." Kakashi sighed and said, "By all rights we should end the mission right here. A B rank is too much for genin." "Besides," Naruto interrupted, "if you had told the old man, I'm sure he would have been able to figure something out, like a small discount based on circumstances or a payment plan. You didn't have to lie." Tazuna sighed. "Get ready for a bomb. This'll take a while." "We've got time," Kakashi said with a narrowed eye and the smallest bit of killing intent, ensuring to the old man that should he lie he'd regret it. "Right, you see, a few months ago, Gato, an unscrupulous businessman, wandered into town and set up shop without our approval. One man tried to stand up and was beaten to death for it. After that, Gato put heavy tariffs on all trade, took strict control of all the land's money, and basically turned life into a daily living hell. The bridge I'm leading construction on that will connect the land of waves to the land of fire is our only hope at this point. But Gato's power base is too wide, and he always stealing or destroying supplies and equipment, or scaring or killing the workers. With things as they are now, the bridge will never be finished and will stay under Gato's thumb." Kakashi sighed and looked at his team. "What do you think?" Sekirei was the first to speak up. "Kakashi-sensei, we're just genin. We can't handle a battle against enemy ninja. I think we should head back." Sasuke scoffed. "Not a chance. This is the perfect opportunity to test my power and see how strong I am," he said with a smirk. "You can't be serious, Sasuke," Sekirei screamed in disbelief. "Besides, you already did. You fought Gazu and failed hard," Naruto deadpanned. "No one asked you, Naruto," Sasuke nearly shouted to everyone's surprise. Sighing, Naruto said, "While it is true that a B rank is outside the norm for genin, Sasuke and I are more powerful than normal genin. Plus, we have Musabai, Uzium, and the others, not to mention you." Kakashi thought it over and Naruto made several good points. He looked at Tazuna with a distrusting glance and said, "All right, we'll continue, but it is now a B rank. We'll expect the remainder of the payment as soon as you can get it. But," he paused, getting the bridge builder's attention, "if there is anything, I mean anything, else you haven't told us, do it now." Tazuna stroked his beard and said, "I do remember a few of Gato's forces were a bit odd." "What do you mean?" Kakashi asked. "Standing next to him most of the time is his nephew, Higa Izumi." Uzium paled at the person's name, which Naruto noticed. He usually had two rather attractive women with him. One with dark skin and a weird flashy leotard, the other had lighter skin and an even weirder outfit with a long red spear. Uzum nudged Naruto and whispered, "No, 16 Toyotama and no, 18 Ikiya." Naruto whispered back, "They're Sekirei." Uzum nodded. "Izumi's the Ashikabi of the East and a dirty bastard." "Oi," Kakashi yelled, frightening the two. "Right now isn't the time for secrets, Naruto." Naruto grimaced and said to the Jounin, "Can I talk to you in private for a second?" Kakashi narrowed his visible eye but nodded. Once they were away from the group, Kakashi asked, "What's this about, Naruto?" Naruto looked around to make sure none of their group, specifically Sasuke or Sakura, and said, "That Izumi guy is the Leaf's Ashikabi of the East." Kakashi sighed. "I knew I remembered his name. I suppose those women are his Sekirei." Naruto nodded. "Yeah, Toyotama and Ikiya, Uzum told me," he said, seeing the unspoken question on Kakashi's face. "How does she know them?" Kakashi asked suspiciously. Naruto shrugged. "Dunno, she didn't say and I don't think it's my place to pry." Kakashi nodded and said, "In that case, Sasuke and Sakura are bound to discover something about the Sekirei plan, but let's not tell them anything unless absolutely necessary or unavoidable." Naruto nodded and they returned. "Geez, first you say no secrets and now you're telling secrets? Stay consistent, Kakashi-sensei," Sekirei yelled. "Sorry, it had to do with classified information only Naruto and I know. I hope you understand," Kakashi said with finality. This caused Sasuke to grimace further as he put his thought together. Now he's involved with top secret information. Who or what the hell is he? Sasuke clenched his fists so hard it's surprising they didn't bleed. After discussing the new terms of the contract and sending a carrier hawk to the hawkage, the group restarted their journey to the land of waves. Unbeknownst to them, a strange figure inside a Venus flytrap watched them intensely and then sunk into the ground. After traveling for several more days, Naruto and the group arrived at a boat to take them to the land of waves. It would have, but the driver had one little problem. "I can't ferry that many people in one trip," the driver complained. Kakashi rubbed the back of his head and apologized. "I suppose there are a lot of us, aren't there?" Hibiki and Hikari just grumbled. "You know, Kakashi, you should have thought this sooner, you dolt," Hikari scolded. Now, I didn't think we'd have such a small form of transport," Kakashi shot back. "I thought shinobi were prepared for everything," Hibiki retorted. "Well, unfortunately we can't predict the future, so we can only go by our own guesses," he said with a shrug. Hikari gained a tick mark and yelled at him, "Well, you guessed wrong." "Well, it's not my fault. How was I supposed to know that a village requesting a C rank would have been taken over by a BR? Kakashi's apology was interrupted when his Sekirei sent several hundred volts through his body. After the frying was done, Kakashi's hair was sparking, and a couple hairs were on fire, and he puffed out a ball of smoke. He turned to the lightning twins and said, "Oh, that's what you get for being stupid," Hikari said with her arms crossed. Tazuna sighed and started trying to figure this out with the boat driver since the team's commander was utterly useless at the time. Naruto sat down by a tree reading a book when he noticed a shadow block the sun. He looked up to see Sasuke leaning against the tree with a rather irritated look on his face. Naruto gave a feeble smile and asked, "Kakashi's antics getting to you too, Sasuke?" Sasuke squeezed his arm for a second and answered, "Kakashi doesn't bother me. I wanted to talk to you specifically, Naruto," Sasuke corrected himself. Naruto raised an eyebrow, closed his book and asked, "Weird, but I'm game. Sit down and we'll talk." Sasuke looked at him rather constipated looking before swallowing his pride and complying. Naruto leaned his head against the tree and asked quietly, "What's up?" Sasuke answered just as hushed, "I want to know how you got so powerful." Naruto nearly fell over. "Wait, what was that?" he asked in disbelief that Sasuke actually admitted to him being more powerful. Sasuke just retorted, I didn't stutter." Naruto narrowed his eyes but thought, well, at least he's starting to open up. "I've dealt with his taunting so far. A little longer is all it should take," he finished with a hopeful smile. Clearing his throat he said, "Training, lots of it, and also my original sensei helped a bit." Sasuke narrowed his eyes and thought, there he goes again with that damn sensei of his. Just who the hell is it? Naruto, who was this sensei of yours? He asked, hoping for an answer. Naruto sighed and said, we've already been over this, I can't tell you. I will tell you that he's very strong. Basically, he raised me in secret after a particularly bad beating I got. After that, he started training me, and by the time I was 10, he had brought me up to high academy levels. Naruto paused and looked down with a sad smile. But when I was 12, he left. I don't know why or what happened, but, Naruto said, biting his lip, he just disappeared. Sasuke was in shock. Not only in that Naruto was as powerful as an academy graduate when he was 10, but that he seemed to so deeply care about this person. Sasuke looked down himself and realized something he had wanted to deny every day, that the loss of the bonds of family weren't felt by him alone. Sasuke bit his lips so hard it bled, and then said quickly, he sounds like a great person. Leaving no time for Naruto to reply, he stood up and left. Naruto just looked at him in shock. Then he gave a mirthless smile and thought, yeah, he was. Eventually, Kakashi and Tazuna were able to work out a deal with the driver. He would make multiple trips to take everyone, but he got an extra 4,000 ryo in return. Naturally, Kakashi was chosen to pay the man. In a distant, rain-soaked village, atop a massive tower, a man with pale skin and orange hair sat talking to someone standing in the shadows. So, Team 7 has arrived in the land of waves, The shadowed man said with excitement. Yes, they will soon encounter Zabuza and Haku. When they do, it is likely the Nine Tails and his Sekirei will defeat them. After that they will call for help, the orange-haired man said. And by help, you mean Kasami, don't you? He asked with a maniacal grin. The orange-haired man simply nodded. Shall I send some backup with him? The shadowed man asked. Yes, send Benitsubasa and Karasuba. They will be enough, the orange-haired man commanded. The shadowed man bowed and said, Of course, Lord Pain. Back in the land of waves, the group was walking through a forest that connected to the actual village. After a short time, Naruto heard movement to his right and motioned quickly and subtly. As if hearing her Ashikabi's thoughts, Akitsu launched several ice spikes into a nearby bush, catching everyone's attention. Akitsu walked over and saw a small white rabbit. She looked at with a light blush and slowly reached to pick it up, but was knocked away by a screaming Sakura who grabbed the rabbit and wrapped it tightly in her arms and scolded the ice woman. You moron, you could have killed it. Sakura immediately froze when she noticed Naruto's not too subtle glare. He walked over and helped Akitsu up and asked, You okay? She nodded and began forming more ice spears. Naruto flicked her on the forehead, leaving a red mark. Don't waste your energy. Disappointed that she didn't get her retaliation, she complied all the same. The group continued walking and Naruto picked up his pace and walked beside Kakashi and spoke quietly. Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi made no motions and responded, I know. Sasuke raised an eyebrow, but then almost face-palmed when he realized what they were talking about. He thought to himself, it's summer. White rabbits only appear in the winter, unless they're kept in captivity. Sasuke looked at them, and they nodded. He did so in return. Kakashi suddenly froze, as did Naruto. Immediately, Naruto grabbed Sasuke and Akitsu, while Kakashi grabbed Sakura and Hikari, and they both shouted, Get down! Everyone did, and a massive sword whizzed overhead and embedded itself in a tree. Kakashi leaned up and turned around slowly to look at it, and when he did, his eye widened and he paled. On the sword stood a tall and muscular man with pale skin, short spiky black hair, bandages wrapped over the bottom half of his face, a sideways hidden mist headband with a slash through it, a belt around his torso and baggy gray pants with black and white cameo leg warmers. Kakashi looked at him and said, You're Zabuza Mamachi. Zabuza looked at Kakashi and smirked under his mask. And you must be Kakashi Headache, he said in a deep, gravelly voice. This is bad, Kakashi said. Everyone, get in a manji formation, Kakashi ordered. The Sekirei just looked at him blankly. Yuzume spoke first. What does that mean? She asked sheepishly. Without missing a beat, Naruto started giving commands to his Sekirei. Surround Tazuna, Musabai, stand in front facing Zabuza, Yuzume, in the back with your veils as spikes. Akitsu, stand directly in front of Tazuna and make an ice dome. Right, all three spoke at once. Sasuke looked at the blonde in surprise and smirked, then said, "Guess that means we get to have some fun, huh?" Naruto looked at him with a cocky grin and nodded. "No," Kakashi ordered. "Naruto, you have sensor abilities, check for other enemies." Naruto nodded and extended his senses with Kurama's chakra. His eyes snapped open and he said, "Kakashi, I found two, each 10 meters away and flanking." Kakashi nodded in response. Zabuza was annoyed. "Tisk, Taki, thicken the mist." "Taki?" Kakashi said. Just then, the light mist that was surrounding them thickened. "Damn, can't see a thing." "That's good for me, Kakashi," Zabuza said with a chuckle. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sekirei stood in a triangle formation around Tazuna right as Zabuza released some of his killer intent. Everyone could feel it. Sekirei started trembling and shaking, ready to fall to her knees. The Sekirei looked majorly unaffected, but were all sweating, except Musabai, who was too excited about fighting a powerful opponent to notice the aura. Naruto was unaffected, but he noticed something next to him. Sasuke was shaking at every joint. He was sweating profusely and thought, I can't take this. If this is what fighting someone of this caliber is like, I can't." He slowly brought his kunai up to his throat when a hand latched onto his wrist. He looked to his left in bewilderment and saw Naruto giving him an intense stare. "Stop, I won't let my comrade do something so stupid. Besides, if this pitiful amount of killing aura overwhelms you, you suck as an avenger," he said sarcastically but with a serious expression. Sasuke snapped to consciousness and took several calming breaths. Naruto looked at him just as intensely and asked, "Better?" Eased but still moving stiffly and sweating, he nodded. Naruto gave him a grin and said, "Good," and let go. Sasuke berated himself for being ready to give up so quickly. This man was nothing to Itachi, he was sure of it. Kakashi and Zabuza were in a stare down until Zabuza jumped off his sword and taunted, "All right, Kakashi. If you won't make the first move, then I will," he grunted as he removed the executioner's blade. It was a massive one-sided broadsword longer than Zabuza was tall, with a groove near the base to be perched on the wielder's shoulder, a hole near the end, and it was nearly as wide as a man's torso. Zabuza stuck the end in the ground and stared at Kakashi for a second before grabbing the sword, pulling it out, and swinging it behind him. Zabuza rushed at Kakashi at speeds that would be theoretically impossible when using a sword that big. Then again, that's probably why they call him the Demon of the Hidden Mist, Kakashi thought while dodging and ducking Zabuza's attacks. Kakashi ducked under a vertical swing, jumped to the side to dodge a horizontal slash, and backpedaled from a lunge. Now, as he took advantage of Zabuza's recovery time and planted his foot on the blade, formed a fist, and launched forward by surging chakra from the bottom of his foot, nailing Zabuza in the jaw and sending him flying. Meanwhile, Sasuke and Naruto fought off water clones of Zabuza. A clone from the mist tried to bisect Naruto, but he blocked it with a kunai, and one of his shadow clones kicked it in the face, turning it back into a puddle of water. Sasuke hopped to the right to avoid a downward slash and threw several kunai, dispelling a clone. Musabai had two clones at once. They tried to get her with a scissor cut, but she leapt into the air and came down with a double heel kick, dispelling them. Uzume was faring the best, or the worst. The best because every clone that got within visible range was stabbed by her veil spears. The worst because her veils were getting soaked, requiring more and more chakra to hold up. She grunted in irritation as she stabbed another clone. This time, the veil she used hit the ground, too soaked and heavy to use. "Damn," she cursed, realizing her other veils weren't far away from joining it. Akitsu looked out from within the dome with a nigh unnoticeable worried expression. Both her Ashikabi and her sister Sekirei were fighting for their lives, and she was just standing there protecting a drunk old man. She grit her teeth in annoyance. She wanted desperately to join in the fight. Her Ashikabi ordered her to guard Tazuna, and as the one who gave her hope and a future, she would be damned before she disobeyed him. Over in the trees, a silver-haired woman with a revealing white dress and short gray skirt watched the blonde human in curiosity. Why is he trying so desperately to protect that old buzzard? He's not even thankful and is just leering at his Sekirei. How bizarre. Naruto dispelled another clone only to discover too late that one was behind him. He grit his teeth but was surprised when Sasuke axe kicked it, dispelling it. Sasuke looked at him with a smirk and asked, "You okay, loser?" Naruto looked at him with a grin and said, "Just fine, jerk." The two split and began their defense anew. Sekirei, however, was standing just outside the dome with her kunai held low in an amateur defensive position and quaking in fear. She heard the sounds of battle all around her but couldn't tell where they were coming from. Every slash, clang, and punch caused her flinch. She was ready to faint. Up in the trees, a cloaked figure watched Sekirei quaking in fear at the assault and found himself gripping the tree so hard it began to crack. Just then he noticed movement in front of her. Sekirei watched in terror as one of Zabusa's water clones walked up to her slowly, its sword perched on its shoulder. She backed up against the ice wall, her knees shaking and kunai starting to slip from sweat. The clone inched closer and Sekirei fell to the ground, looking at it with horror. It raised its sword in the air and swung it downward. "Ah!" she screamed. "Sekirei!" everyone yelled. "Damn it," Naruto said. He formed several hand signs and thought, "I only just learned it, but the best place to practice is the battlefield." He inhaled a massive amount of air and said, "Wind style, great breakthrough." All of the air rushed out at once, blowing away and clearing the mist. Naruto and Sasuke ran to Sekirei and paled at what they saw. Sekirei sat there on the grass, barely able to move and eyes glazed over in fear. In front of her, a masked man with wild silver hair and a black cloak had a wall of fire blocking the water clone's sword. He reeled back his fist and encased it in flame and shouted, "Piss off!" and punched straight through the clone, dispelling it. "Homura!" Uzum shouted, shocked to see the self-proclaimed guardian of unwinged Sekirei so far from the village. She then noticed something else. Despite his face being mostly hidden, she could see his cheeks were flushed, and his eyes were heavy as he breathed shallowly and rapidly. He's reacting. But to who? She wondered. She then noticed who he was guarding, Sekirei. Homura fell into a kneel and looked at Sekirei, who couldn't believe she was just saved. He looked at her and said, "I need you to wing me." Sekirei just blinked. "Eh?" "Never mind, just sit still," he said, pulling down his mask. Sekirei's face filled with heat. His face had the perfect balance of masculinity and femininity. It looked strong and powerful, and yet fragile and kind, his silver hair falling into just the right spots. She let out an eep when she noticed he got closer. He put his hand on her chin, lifted her head and said, "You are my Ashikabi." Sekirei didn't have time to ponder as he took her lips in a deep, burning kiss. The Sekirei mark lit up on his back while multiple wings of flame burst from his back. Zabusa raised an eyebrow while Kakashi thought, "I didn't realize she was an Ashikabi." Sekirei's mind shut off completely. This cute guy just kissed her out of the blue. Not only that, he was protecting her, and she could tell the kiss was not normal, or at least that's what she thought since it was her first. "Wait, my first? I wanted my first to be with Sasuke," she screamed in her head when she noticed what wasn't normal about the kiss. Homura was absorbing her chakra, and lots of it. Homura stood up and glared defiantly at Zabusa, while Sekirei just sat there swaying back and forth while her brain tried ineffectually to reboot. Homura looked at Zabusa and spoke, "For attacking my Ashikabi, you will burn." He rushed at Zabusa and launched several blasts of flame from his hands. Zabusa jumped to the side, dodged them, and then brought up his sword to block them. A move he quickly regretted as Kakashi chopped him in the ribs with his hand, causing the swordsman to buckle in pain. He looked up in time to receive a flaming roundhouse from Homura that sent him into the water, not resurfacing. Homura panted for a minute before calming down and looking at Kakashi and was about to explain himself when Kakashi put up his hand. "I don't care why you were following us, I'm just glad you were here," he said while examining the situation. Puzzled, Homura nodded and rushed back to Sekirei's side. He knelt down and put his hand to her forehead. "She's okay, just fatigued." Kakashi nodded and said, "All right, let's go." Everyone nodded, and they resumed their trek to Tazuna's house. On the edge of the forest, Taki stood there unable to take her mind off Naruto when someone walked up to her. "We need to go, Master Zabusa could be injured," they said. Looking to her comrade and back again, Taki nodded uncertainly and followed. The Leaf Group finally arrived at Tazuna's self-proclaimed superhouse, a simple two-story town home sitting uneasily on a pier overlooking the water. Needless to say, Naruto was not impressed. They entered and saw a pretty young woman with long, dark blue hair, dark-colored eyes, and wearing a pink shirt and blue pants who was cooking a meal. She turned to see Tazuna waving and said, "Father, you're home." "Oh my," she said in surprise. "They sent a veritable army, didn't they?" Tazuna laughed and said, "Yes, Tsunami, it seems they did. Everyone, this is my daughter, Tsunami." Most everyone bowed, except Sakura, who was flung over Homura's shoulder still unconscious. Kakashi walked up to Tsunami and asked, "Do you have some rooms we could use?" Tsunami nodded happily. "Of course, just follow me." She led them upstairs to a series of rooms and told which ones were owned and which ones they could use. Kakashi thanked and everyone set up. In their room, Homura laid Sakura down gently on the futon and threw the blanket over her. Then he sat next to the window sill watching over her and waited for her to wake up. In Naruto's room, he unsealed a bed he always kept with him, which resulted in a fight between his Sekirei about who got to sleep at his side. Naruto just sweat-dropped and waited for them to stop. In Sasuke's room, he looked around and then decided to check his supplies in preparation for future battles, and to think over everything that had happened. Kakashi sat in a corner of his room like a child while getting scolded by his Sekirei about being reckless. He just sighed and wished he could read. In a remote corner of one of the forests in the Land of Waves, in a large treehouse high in the boughs of the trees, Zabuza lay in a bed being tended to by one of his followers, Haku. Haku was a young woman with long black hair, dark eyes, and soft features, despite posing as a male the majority of the time to avoid unneeded hassle. To aid her, she usually wore chest bindings to hide her melons. She also wore a pink sleeveless kimono with red edges and plum-colored swirl patterns. Taki stood in the corner glaring at Haku, irritated by the same basic matters as always. Haku could blend into a crowd, because her features were just masculine enough that if she told someone she was a guy, they would believe her. But due to Taki's voluptuous features, she had no chance of hiding and always received whistles and lecherous stares. "I wonder if that boy would look at me like that. Wait, what am I doing?" she shouted in her head and thought resolutely, "He's the enemy. He's threatening Zabuza. He's just so cute." She almost squealed while pressing her hands against her cheeks and swooning, imagining a very Bishonen Naruto smiling at her with glinting teeth. She was brought out of her wet dream by Haku. "Taki, I need to tend to Master Zabuza. You need to go and collect some herbs for a salve," she ordered, either unaware or unconcerned with Taki's hateful glare. "HMPH, Taki said with an about-face. "Fine, I'll get the herbs. Just don't boss me around," she demanded, pointing angrily at Haku. Haku narrowed her eyes at her said coldly, "And why not? I have my ice style, needles, senbon, dragons, and mirrors, along with even more, and all you have is your mist. Therefore I am superior, especially in Master Zabuza's eyes." Taki just glared daggers at the woman and stomped off to a clearing with many medicinal flowers. Inside Tazuna's house, Sakura had finally woken up, but was more than surprised to see Homura there. She looked wearily at him and thought back to when she woke up. On her futon, Sakura started to come to, tossing and moaning. Seeing this, Homura turned his attention to her as she sat up. She looked around wearily and asked, "Where am I?" In the window behind her, Homura spoke up, in a room inside Tazuna's house. Sakura turned around and saw the Bishonen and jumped with a scream. Homura just sighed. He walked over and put a hand on the screaming Sakura's shoulder and gave her as sweet a smile he could muster. She looked at him with a light dusting of pink and turned away, poking her fingers together in an embarrassed manner. Then she froze and thought, "Wait a second, when did I become Hinata? I'm not a scaredy cat. I'm the daring and beautiful Sakura. Cha." She looked at Homura and took a calming breath and asked, "Who are you?" Homura sat down and told her his name, along with the basics of the Sekirei plan. After that they went downstairs and Homura explained the situation to the only other two Ashikabi, Naruto and Kakashi. Sakura was extremely surprised, and then realized that Naruto and Kakashi's new harems made a little more sense, though she still thought it was creepy. After they explained to her the duties of an ashikabi, they told her how secretive it was and included not telling Sasuke until they returned to the village. Disappointed at not having something to boast about, she agreed dejectedly. This led to their current situation with Sekirei sitting in between Sasuke and Homura. She was unable to decide who to look at. Feeling his ashikabi's uncertainty, Homura looked at her when she looked back and gave her a comforting smile, which seemed to calm her down a bit. Kakashi then started discussing with Naruto and the others their situation. So as far as we can tell, Gojo controls most of the city and uses extortion and force to keep his tight grip, he said with his eye closed like he was going through a list printed on his eyelid. Tazuna nodded. Kakashi opened his eye and continued. So, our current problem is facing Zabuza. Until we get rid of him, we can't stop Gojo. Then after that we have to take down his forces. Naruto nodded, then looked at Tazuna and said, I could help with the construction. Tazuna looked at him doubtfully and said, You're just a kid. Naruto chuckled and replied, But I can have the strength of 1,000 men if you need it. Tazuna raised an eyebrow, but diverted his attention when a new voice spoke up. Why bother? Someone said. Naruto and the others turned to see a young boy with short, unkempt black hair wearing a white and blue striped fisherman's hat, a pale yellow shirt and green overalls. Naruto narrowed his eyes and asked, What was that? Why bother fighting Gojo? It's hopeless. He's too powerful. You'll just die anyway, he said succinctly, as if it were a fact. Naruto glared at the boy now. Listen here, brat, everyone tensed as Naruto stood up. You may not know it, but we're stronger than we look. Gojo is just a dirty old fat ass with a lot of money. One ninja is stronger than 100 thugs. The boy clenched his fists and shouted, GRR, you just don't get it, do you? Everyone who stood up to him has died. Just give up and go home. Naruto slapped the boy across the face. He then said, We accepted this mission, and a ninja completes a mission he is given no matter what. And I don't intend to give just because some snot-nosed brat can't tell how strong someone is. Naruto stomped over to the door and prepared to leave. Kakashi stood up from his seat, said, Naruto, where are you going? To blow off some steam. Nobody follow me, he shouted as he slammed the door. The boy started crying and ran upstairs. Stupid Naruto, making a kid cry like that, Sekirei chided. He's not wrong, Homura added, confusing Sekirei. Just because something seems hopeless doesn't mean you just give up. You look for another solution. Sekirei glared at him for a second before sighing and saying, I guess you're right. In a flower-filled clearing, Naruto made 100 shadow clones. However, instead of splitting them up for training, he just had them bum rush him and he fought them all at once. The clones attacked him relentlessly, and after about 2 hours he defeated them all. Lying in the flower bed, physically exhausted and tired, he drifted off and fell asleep right there. The next morning, Naruto awoke because Kurama told him he was being watched. He tiredly opened his eyes and thought it was still night because it was dark. That's when he realized there were bits of sunlight visible. Waiting for his eyes to focus, he saw a pair of dark gray orbs staring into his blue ones. He said groggily, "A angel?" Taki giggled and sat up. "Sorry, just a regular mortal." Naruto sat up and got a better look at her and realized just how pretty she was. This caused him to blush. Taki looked at him and giggled a little. Annoyed with her laughing, he asked with a pout, "What's so funny?" Stifling her laughter, she said, "First I see you passed out in a clearing, then you give that lost in space look. I couldn't stop from laughing." HMPH, Naruto crossed his arms and turned his chin. Motioning him to listen, she asked, "So, what's your name?" Naruto pointed to himself with his thumb and said, "I'm Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. Shinobi extraordinaire and future Hokage. Believe it." Taki giggled again. Naruto shook a fist and pointed at her and shouted, "Would you stop that? Anyway, who are you?" Taki waved at him and said, Sorry, you're just too funny. And my name's Taki." She suddenly became worried and said, "Oops." Naruto blinked several times and then thought, "Ah, you're the person that was working with Zabuza." Taki tapped her forehead and said, "Great." In a large concrete complex, two people were talking. One was Higa Izumi and his uncle Goto Ramper. They were discussing Zabuza's defeat by Kakashi's group. Zabuza was beaten by a washed-up old jonin and a bunch of kids, Gato shouted, gripping his cane so hard it shook. Izumi sat on the opposite side of Gato's desk, his chin resting on the butt of his hand and a confident grin on his face. Behind him stood Toyotama and Ikiya, standing stoically and waiting for orders. "Please, uncle, stop worrying so much. We have other means of dealing with them," Izumi said with a high degree of coolness. "What, you mean your army of bimbos?" Gato chided. Toyotama stepped forward and was about to retort, but Izumi put his hand up and gave her a stern look. Toyotama looked irked but complied. "That's the general idea," he told his uncle. "TCH, at least it'll be cheaper than hiring more rogue ninja. The only problem is Zabuza represents a loose end." Izumi chuckled. "I've got everything under control." Gato narrowed his eyes and nodded. "Fine, then handle it. And if you fail, don't come back and drag your ass back to the leaf." Toyotama couldn't take it. Even if he's Izumi's uncle, nobody insults her ashikabi. "All right, listen here, you pig." Izumi immediately stood up and slapped her. "Silence, Toyotama," he said coldly. She was in shock. Toyotama had chided her before, but never slapped her, and she was defending him. After leaving, the group walked in silence and Toyotama decided to break it with a question. "Izumi, why did you do that?" she asked, putting her hand against her sore cheek. Without turning around, Izumi answered, "Because, while you do fight for me, your methods are too brash for political and economic maneuverings. So when I'm talking, just know I'm always in control, so be silent unless I say otherwise." Toyotama cringed at his words and tone, and felt nothing through the bond but annoyance to her. She sighed and continued walking. In Zabuza's hideout, Zabuza, despite being weakened, had just written a letter for assistance to one of his old teammates. Paku rolled up the note and put it on the leg of an owl and sent it off. She turned back to Zabuza and asked, "Master Zabuza, are you sure we can trust him?" Weakly, Zabuza nodded and responded, "Yes. Kasame is a battle-hungry psychopath. As a result, fighting powerful opponents would be enough. The money would be a bonus." Haku nodded. "Very well." She walked to the window and said, "Why are you taking so long, Taki?" In a field of flowers, Naruto and Taki sat opposite each other. Naruto frozen in his face fought with his finger pointing accusingly at Taki. Taki simply looked on, somehow managing to look annoyed and sheepish at the same time. After Naruto recovered from the sheer comedy of his current predicament, he immediately stood up, jumped back and pulled out a kunai. Taki became alarmed, jumped to her feet and waved her arms in front of her defensively, yelling, "Wait, wait, wait. Why? So you can get ready to fight me?" "I don't think so," Naruto fired back. "I'm not a combat type, I can't fight you," she said, hoping it calmed him down. Naruto narrowed his eyes in suspicion before realizing what her words meant. "Combat type? Isn't that something a Sekirei would say? Wait, are you a?" She nodded. "Yeah, I'm a Sekirei, but my only real ability is to create mist." "So, you couldn't fight even if you wanted to?" he asked, still on alert. She nodded while answering nervously, "I swear I wasn't followed, either." Naruto extended his senses to confirm her claim. He relaxed his stance and returned his kunai into his pouch. Keeping a guarded eye on her, he said, "All right, but one wrong move and I'll take you down." She nodded. "Fair enough. I guess I should reintroduce myself. I am Taki, Sekirei no 65. So, what are you doing sleeping out here, anyway?" "Last night, I needed to blow off some steam, so I came here. I must have exhausted myself and nodded off after I was done. What about you? What are you doing out here, and shouldn't you be a little more suspicious of an enemy?" he asked, keeping the focus on her instead. He took in her whole form as he kept his wary eye on her. Her long grayish-white hair was perfectly symmetrical, her bangs parting in front of her face almost like two ribbons and ending at her collarbone, while the rest of her hair flowed down her back and parting much the same way as her bangs, while ending at her lower back. She was a few inches taller than him, and was garbed in an elegant, wild dress that started at her neck like a choker, but parted a couple of inches below that to reveal the inside of her cleavage and her midsection while coming back together at her waist. She wore a long-sleeved overcoat of the same color over her dress, giving her a sophisticated yet seductive aura. Taki sighed as she responded to his question. Well, while you're not a friend, I don't consider you an enemy either. I'm just here to collect herbs to assist in healing Zabuza. I work for him and my only function is to make his mist. Naruto narrowed his eyes and asked, heal him? I guess he's badly injured. I'd rather not go into too many details about him, I'm sure you understand. Then she brought her finger up to her lips and looked at him with a flirty expression. But I'll tell you anything you want to know about me. Naruto had forced down the blush she brought on. He shook his head and said, it's a start. Why are you working for Zabuza? She shrugged. He's all I've got. I don't have an Ashikabi, so I stick with Zabuza. I figured he was your Ashikabi, he said confused. Taki turned up her nose and huffed. Please, that brute is far too brash to be my Ashikabi. Naruto was utterly confused now. Wait, you don't want him to be your Ashikabi? Taki clasped her hands and saw stars. Of course not. I don't even like Zabuza. My Ashikabi will be handsome and kind, and he'll defend me to his last breath. Naruto's sweat dropped and thought, she is totally delusional. Taki continued while Naruto thought that to himself. And when he wings me, he'll scoop me up into his arms, carry me off to a nice secluded place, and then he'll tear all my clothes off and pound me into oblivion with his wonderful meat stick. Naruto's face faltered at that last admission, particularly because she spoke of it as though it was the most romantic and wonderful idea in the world, finishing it with a longing sigh. She hadn't lost her starry-eyed gaze. Where the hell does she get this stuff? The make-out books? He thought to himself at the sheer ridiculousness of the very notion in this woman's head. But she seemed to come back down to earth as she finished with a regretful tone. Sadly, I haven't found my Ashikabi yet, so until I do, I'll just survive and keep searching. But you can be sure that the moment I do find my Ashikabi, I'll drop Zabuza like a bad habit. Naruto laughed uncomfortably, both at her resolve in finding her Ashikabi and at her romantic ideas of how her winging would proceed. Right, well, do you have any ideas about how to find your Ashikabi? Because if you want, I could help you, and then you won't have to work for Zabuza anymore. Taki put her hand on her chin and thought deeply. After several seconds she sighed and said, thank you very much for the offer, but I can't risk leaving Zabuza until I find an Ashikabi. First, she seemed to grow worried before she continued. I think I've been gone long enough. Any longer and they'll get suspicious. They really don't like me or trust me. If only I could gather the herbs faster. She trailed off and started looking around as though a solution would jump out at her. Naruto put on his foxy grin and said, tell me what you need and I can gather them in no time. Taki opened her eyes in surprise. Intrigued, she gave Naruto the list. After memorizing it, he made his famous cross-hand sign, and 20 shadow clones burst into existence. Wow, Taki said with a very impressed smile. Okay guys, let's grab the beautiful lady what she needs. Naruto ordered his clones, who immediately went to work with gusto and enthusiasm. Taki watched with mild amazement as Naruto and his clones quickly gathered the herbs she came to collect. She couldn't help the small, grateful smile that crossed her face. So there really are some men out there who aren't abusive or nasty. I think I like you, Naruto Uzumaki, she thought to herself as her heart started to beat just a little faster and her face became mildly flushed. Only a few short minutes later, Naruto had gathered the herbs she needed and then some. She looked at him with a smile, and then a frown. Then she looked down sadly and asked, Naruto, why would you gather herbs for Zabuza? He's your enemy, and he's, well, honestly, he's a monster. Naruto chuckled and rubbed his nose. I didn't gather these herbs for Zabuza, Taki. Taki gave him a puzzled look. What? But I didn't gather them for Zabuza. Naruto interrupted her playfully. I gathered them for you. Taki's eyes grew wide as her blush grew stronger. Her heart felt like it almost stopped. Her body began to heat up, and her Sekirei symbol began to burn behind her neck. Realizing what was happening, she began walking towards Naruto slowly and unconsciously as her breathing began to quicken. I've found you, she thought as she inched closer to him. You're him, aren't you, Naruto Uzumaki? I can leave Zabuza now. With that last thought, she immediately grew terrified and froze where she was. She had dreamed of the day that she could leave Zabuza Mamachi's company, but now that the possibility was right there in front of her, she realized something. Zabuza would not simply let her go quietly. If Zabuza finds out about this, he'll likely kill Naruto. I can't allow that to happen, she yelled to herself in desperation, all the while hoping to find a way to be with the man she now knew was her destined Ashikabi. She bowed quickly before stating abruptly, I must go, Naruto. I'm glad to have met you. She turned and began to walk briskly away, leaving Naruto just gaping in confusion while wondering what had just happened. She stopped suddenly and turned back to him. Walking back up to him, she took most of her herbs from her basket and handed the bunch to Naruto. What are you giving these to me for? He asked, genuinely confused at this woman's actions. From the look of things, you've pretty much picked this area clean of herbs, so I thought. She began to grow somewhat shy as she continued in a slightly more subdued manner, that if I only take what I need today, it gives me an excuse to come back here tomorrow. So, could you hold on to those for me? I'd like to keep meeting you here if that's okay. Naruto's confusion gave way to a soft smile. I'd like that, Taki. Yeah, I can hold on to these for you. I can even preserve them in a sealing scroll so they stay fresh. So same time tomorrow morning. Taki gave him a radiant smile as she nodded and quickly went on her way, glancing back at him one last time before disappearing into the forest. Naruto stood there for a few more minutes smiling, and then frowned, then scowled. Finally, he broke out into a full-blown death glare. He turned and punched a nearby tree, sending spider web cracks through it. Then he said, Damn Manaka. This shit is all his fault. The only reason she's working for that beach is because she's been told finding and serving her Ashikabi is all that matters. I swear, when I find that bastard, I'll break every damn bone in his body. Several moments later, his Sekirei showed up. He looked at them surprised and asked, Something wrong? So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author ZuttoAragi on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.